Arizona, 1873. The sunset painted Cedar Creek in blood-red hues as Ethan Wade dropped to his knees, cradling his younger brother's body. Noah's white shirt bloomed crimson as his life ebbed away with each labored breath. "Hold on, Noah. Just hold on." Ethan's voice cracked, his hands pressing desperately against the wound. Noah's eyes fixed on Ethan with fading clarity. His fingers clutched weakly at Ethan's shirt. "Papers," he gasped. "In the judge's safe. Prove everything. Don't talk. Save your strength." A shadow of a smile crossed Noah's pale lips. "Too late for that, brother." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Promise me you'll finish what I started." "I promise," Ethan said, the words catching in his throat. "I swear it, Noah." With one final shuddering breath, Noah Wade died in his brother's arms, his blood seeping into the Arizona soil. Ethan threw back his head and howled his grief to the indifferent sky. Arizona, 1876. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Ethan Wade guided his horse across the vast terrain. At 35, his face was weathered beyond his years, eyes permanently narrowed from squinting against harsh light and harsher memories. The Civil War had hardened him. The death of his brother had hollowed him out. The sealed package tucked inside his jacket held his attention. Ethan had taken the job without asking questions, delivered from a Tucson lawyer to the federal office in Cedar Creek. Movement flickered in his peripheral vision. Ethan's hand moved toward his holster. 3 years as a drifter had honed instincts already sharp from war. His horse's ears flicked nervously as Ethan scanned the rocky outcroppings dotting the barren landscape. Perfect places for an ambush. 3 riders appeared as if conjured from heat waves, cutting off his path with guns drawn. "That's far enough, Wade," called the leader, a man with a pockmarked face. Ethan halted, expression unchanged though his mind raced. They knew his name. "Hand over the package and we might let you ride away," the second man said, a thin smile splitting his bearded face. "What package?" Ethan's voice remained steady, his hand casually resting near his holster. The third man spat. "Don't play dumb. Gallagher wants what you're carrying and your head to go with it." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Judge Harrison Gallagher, the man who had employed Noah, the man Ethan suspected was behind his brother's murder. "I don't know any Gallagher," he lied, calculating his odds. "Your funeral," the leader said, raising his gun. Ethan drew and fired in one fluid motion. The leader jerked backward, surprise flashing across his face before he toppled from his saddle. The world exploded into chaos. Ethan launched himself from his horse as bullets tore through the air. He rolled behind a boulder, coming up firing. Pain seared through his side. A bullet found its mark. Warm blood soaked his shirt, but adrenaline kept the worst of the pain at bay. His horse screamed and fell, struck by a stray bullet. Ethan gritted his teeth and kept firing, taking down a second attacker. The third man, realizing he was suddenly alone, turned his horse and fled, dust billowing in his wake. Silence descended, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. He pressed a hand to his side, wincing as it came away red. "Damn it," he muttered. Miles from anywhere, wounded, without a horse. The package still inside his jacket felt like a burning coal. Whatever it contained, it was important enough for Gallagher to send men to kill for it. Important enough, perhaps, to finally bring the justice Noah had died seeking. With grim determination, Ethan began to walk. Each step sent pain shooting through his side, but he pushed it aside with the practice of a man accustomed to suffering. As the sun climbed higher, his thoughts turned to Noah, his little brother, always with a book in hand, always asking questions. How different they'd been. Ethan, the soldier, Noah, the thinker. Yet it was Noah who had found the courage to stand against corruption, while Ethan had been wandering, trying to outrun ghosts of the war. "I'm sorry, Noah," he whispered. "I should have been there." The memories came unbidden, returning from the war to find their parents gone, victims of a fever, Noah working as a clerk for Judge Gallagher, their arguments about Ethan's restlessness. Then that terrible day, the gunfight in the street, Noah dying in his arms, whispering of papers and evidence. 3 years of searching, of taking odd jobs that brought him closer to Cedar Creek, of listening for any mention of Gallagher. Now, by chance or fate, he carried something the judge was willing to kill for. Hours passed. The sun began its descent, and still Ethan walked, his vision blurred. Each breath became a struggle. The package, his gun, even his hatred for Gallagher, all faded against the singular focus of taking one more step, until he couldn't anymore. His knees buckled, and the harsh ground rushed up to meet him. Grit scraped his palm as he caught himself, not quite fallen. "Guess this is it," he murmured. The desert would claim him, as it had claimed countless others. No one came to this dried-up riverbed unless they were lost. As consciousness began to slip away, Ethan's thoughts turned to a small creek near the farm where he and Noah had grown up. Cool water rushing over smooth stones. The sound of Noah's laughter. "I'm coming, little brother," he whispered. "I tried." The faint sound of hoofbeats reached him, but Ethan was too far gone to care. Just another trick of the dying mind, he thought. As darkness claimed him, Ethan Wade surrendered to the inevitable. Ethan forced his eyes open to slits. The world swam in and out of focus. Above, stars speckled the night sky. He was moving on horseback. Someone held him upright, a warm presence against his back. Ethan tried to speak, but his parched throat produced only a faint rasp. "Be still." A woman's voice, low and firm. "You lose more blood when you move." With enormous effort, he turned his head slightly. In the starlight, he caught a glimpse of his rescuer, a woman with long black hair in a braid, her profile distinctly Native American. Apache, he guessed, from the patterns on her clothing. "Who?" he managed to croak. "Elena," she answered, not looking down. "And you are the man stupid enough to walk through desert with bullet in him." Despite his condition, Ethan felt a flicker of wry amusement at her bluntness. "Ethan," he replied. "Wade." She stiffened almost imperceptibly at his name, but kept her eyes fixed ahead. "Save strength, Ethan Wade. We have far to go." Questions crowded his mind, but darkness was closing in again. As he slipped back into unconsciousness, something fluttered to the ground from the woman's pocket. A small piece of paper. In the moonlight, Ethan caught a glimpse of a photograph. A face he would know anywhere. Noah. The shock of recognition was the last thing he registered before blackness claimed him once more. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Flashes of starlight. The rhythmic sound of hoofbeats. Pain. Always pain. When he fully awoke again, it was to unfamiliar surroundings. A rough wooden ceiling. The scent of oil and smoke. Warmth from a nearby fire. Ethan lay on a narrow cot in a small cabin with a stone fireplace. Elena sat by the fire, grinding something in a stone bowl. In the firelight, he saw her clearly for the first time. She was 27, her features speaking of strength and determination beyond her years. Not conventionally beautiful by white standards, but striking. High cheekbones, a straight nose, eyes dark as midnight that held wisdom from a lifetime of hardship and resilience. The scars on her hands told stories of survival in a harsh land that had taken much from her in her young life. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up. "You wake, good. Was beginning to think I waste medicine on dead man." Ethan tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his side. "Lie still," she commanded. "Bullet gone, but wound still fresh." "You took it out?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. She nodded, bringing the bowl to his bedside. "Not first bullet I dig from man's flesh." She helped him sit up slightly, propping his back with a folded blanket. "Drink." The bowl contained a bitter-smelling liquid. Ethan hesitated. "It's not poison," she said impatiently. "It's medicine. For pain, for fever." Deciding he had little choice, Ethan took the bowl and drank. The taste was bitter, but he swallowed without complaint. "How long?" he asked when finished. 2 days since I find you," Elena replied. "Fever break last night." 2 days. The package. With sudden urgency, Ethan's hand went to his chest, searching. "Looking for this?" Elena held up the sealed package intact. Relief flooded through him, followed by suspicion. "You didn't open it." It wasn't a question, but Elena shook her head. "Not my business." She set the package on the table beside the cot. "Yet you nearly die for it. Must be important." Ethan studied her, trying to read her intentions. "Why help me?" She turned away, returning to the fire. "Many men die in desert. No need to add one more." It wasn't the whole truth. Ethan recognized evasion when he heard it, but he was too weak to press for more. The photograph of Noah weighed on his mind, but something held him back from asking about it. Not yet. First, he needed to understand this woman who had saved his life. For the next few days, Ethan's world narrowed to the confines of the small cabin and the slow process of healing. Elena proved a skilled healer, changing his bandages with practiced hands and preparing medicines from her store of herbs. She answered his basic questions. They were approximately 2 days' ride from where she had found him, hidden in canyons known only to her people, but deflected anything personal with quiet determination. Ethan shared little of himself as well. He spoke of his time in the Union Army, of Gettysburg, but omitted the nightmares. He mentioned Noah in passing as his younger brother who had died 3 years ago, but not the circumstances or his quest for justice. It was a careful dance of half-truths, each sizing up the other, neither willing to lower their guard completely. On the fifth day of May, when Ethan was strong enough to sit at the small table and share a meal, Elena finally broached the subject of his mission. "Those men wanted package," she said, nodding toward the sealed parcel. "Want enough to kill. What is inside?" Ethan considered carefully. "I don't know for certain. I was hired to deliver it to the federal office in Cedar Creek." Elena's dark eyes studied him skeptically. "Yet you know name Gallagher. You react when I speak it." He met her gaze steadily. "Judge Harrison Gallagher is not unknown to me." "Not friend, I think." "No," Ethan agreed, his voice hardening. "Not a friend." A silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Outside, the wind moaned softly through the canyon. "War with Sioux goes badly for your people," Elena said suddenly, changing the subject. "News came before I find you. Many soldiers die at place called Little Bighorn." Ethan nodded grimly. News of Custer's defeat had reached Tucson before he left. "Bad business. It'll make things harder for all tribes, even those not involved." "Always this way," Elena said with quiet bitterness. "One Indian fight, all Indians punished. Soldiers come, take more land, break more promises." She stirred the fire, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. "3 summers ago, they come to my village, say we steal cattle. Lie, but they burn homes, kill many." The pain in her voice was raw, barely contained. Ethan recognized it, the same rage and grief that had driven him these past 3 years. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the inadequacy of the words. Elena shrugged, a gesture that failed to convey indifference. "You not hold rifle that day?" "No, but plenty of others, in the war." Ethan's gaze dropped to his scarred hands. "Sometimes I still hear them. The men I killed." He hadn't meant to reveal so much, but the words escaped before he could stop them. "Dead should stay dead," she said finally. "Not haunt living." Easier said than done. She conceded this with a slight nod. They finished the meal in silence, each lost in their own memories. Later, as Ethan lay on his cot staring at the ceiling, he found himself wondering about the photograph of Noah. The connection between his brother and this Apache woman remained a mystery, one that nagged at him as persistently as his healing wound. Whatever the truth, he would need to uncover it soon. The package had to reach its destination, and Gallagher's men would still be searching. Their sanctuary couldn't last forever. "Noah! Noah!" Ethan's own shout wrenched him from the nightmare, his body drenched in cold sweat despite the cabin's warmth. He sat bolt upright, ignoring the flare of pain from his wound, his heart hammering against his ribs. It took him moments to orient himself, to separate dream from reality. The nightmare had been vivid, Noah bleeding out in the dusty street, but this time his dying words were different. "Why weren't you there, Ethan? You promised to protect me." A soft noise made him turn. Elena stood in the shadows by the door, watching him with fathomless eyes. "Bad dreams," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan ran a shaking hand through his hair. "Did I wake you?" Instead of answering, Elena moved to the fire, stirring the embers and adding a small log. The flames flickered to life, casting the cabin in a warm glow. "You call for Noah," she said, facing the fire. "Your brother." "Yes," Ethan's voice was rough. Elena turned to face him. In the firelight, her expression was solemn. "How did he die?" The bluntness of the question caught Ethan off guard. For a moment he considered deflecting, but something in her steady gaze made him reconsider. "He was shot," Ethan said finally. "In the street in Cedar Creek." 3 years ago. Elena's face remained impassive, but Ethan thought he saw a flicker of pain in her eyes. He was working as a clerk for Judge Gallagher, he continued, the words coming easier. He discovered something Gallagher didn't want known. What thing? Elena asked softly. I don't know exactly. Noah found documents, land deeds, records. He said they proved Gallagher was corrupt, that he was stealing land. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Before he could make what he found to the authorities, he was gunned down, accused of cattle rustling. Of all things, Noah, who could barely ride a horse. Bitterness filled the small cabin. Elena remained silent, her face shadowed. I should have been there, Ethan continued, the confession spilling from him. I was his older brother. I promised our parents before they died that I'd look after him. But I was restless after the war. Couldn't settle. We argued about it. Noah wanted me to stay, to build something. I wanted to keep moving. He looked down at his hands. So I left. And while I was gone playing cards in some saloon 2 counties over, my brother found his courage and stood up to a powerful man, and died for it. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. When Ethan looked up, Elena was studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Noah died for what he believed, she said finally. Not your doing. Doesn't make it easier to bear. No, she agreed quietly. Does not. She moved to the table and poured something from a small bottle into a cup. Drink, she said, offering it to him. Will help sleep. No dreams. Ethan accepted the cup. The liquid inside was sweeter than her previous medicines, with a hint of honey. Thank you, he said, then added, not just for this, for saving my life. Elena nodded once, accepting his gratitude without comment. She turned to go back to her bedroll near the fire, but Ethan's voice stopped her. The photograph, he said, the one of Noah. How did you come to have it? Elena went very still, her back to him. For a long moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Sleep, Ethan Wade, she said finally, barely above a whisper. Dawn comes soon enough. She moved to her bedroll and lay down, effectively ending the conversation. Ethan stared at her back for a while, questions still burning in his mind, before drinking the medicine she had given him. True to her word, when sleep reclaimed him, no dreams followed. A week after Elena had found him, Ethan was strong enough to venture outside. His wound still pulled painfully with quick movements, but the fever was long gone, and cabin fever was setting in. Elena agreed to take him hunting, making it clear it was as much to teach him the canyon paths as to procure food. If trouble comes, she explained as they set out in the crisp morning air, you need no way out. The hidden canyon proved to be part of a complex network, a natural maze impossible to navigate without guidance. Elena moved through it with the confidence of long familiarity, pointing out landmarks, a distinctively shaped rock, a particular cactus, the way shadows fell at certain times. She was an excellent teacher, and Ethan found himself impressed by her knowledge. Growing up on a farm and serving in the war had made him adept at survival, but Elena's understanding of the land went deeper, an intimate connection born of generations living in harmony with the harsh desert. As they tracked a rabbit through a narrow ravine, Ethan noticed how she moved, silent as a ghost, reading faint traces invisible to most men. She was not just surviving in this wilderness, she was part of it. You learned well, he commented, as she pointed out fresh droppings indicating their quarry was close. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. My father teach me. He was medicine man, but also great hunter. Say healer must know plants, animals, all living things. It was the first personal detail she had voluntarily shared, and Ethan felt oddly privileged. He sounds like a wise man. Was, she corrected, a shadow crossing her face. Die in raid, same one I tell you of. I'm sorry, Ethan said genuinely. Elena acknowledged this with a slight nod, then raised her hand for silence, pointing ahead where the ravine widened. The rabbit they had been tracking sat in sparse vegetation, unaware of their presence. With practiced ease, Elena knocked an arrow to her small bow and released in one fluid motion. The arrow found its mark. The rabbit gave one convulsive leap, then was still. As they approached to retrieve their dinner, Elena suddenly froze, dropping into a crouch. Ethan followed suit, instantly alert. What is it? He whispered. She pointed to the ground near the rabbit. Faint impressions in the dry soil. Boot prints, large, made by a white man's footwear. Fresh, Elena whispered back, her expression grim. One day, maybe less. Ethan studied the tracks. One man. She nodded, scanning the ravine warily. Hunter maybe, or... She didn't need to finish. Gallagher's men, still searching. We should go back, Ethan said, reaching for the rabbit. Elena shook her head. First we see where he went. Know what we face. They followed the tracks cautiously. The man had moved with purpose, not the wandering path of someone lost. The tracks led to a wider part of the canyon where several paths converged. Here, they found more troubling signs, remains of a small fire carefully built to produce minimal smoke. Multiple boot prints now, at least 3 men. Camp, Elena murmured, examining the cold ashes. Last night. Ethan's hand moved to his gun, a reassuring weight at his hip. Elena had returned it that morning, cleaned and loaded. Can you tell which way they went? She pointed to one path leading out. That way, toward Main Canyon. Away from the cabin, at least, Ethan observed with relief. For now, Elena said ominously, but they search pattern, methodical. We'll come to our canyon eventually. They exchanged a grave look, understanding the implications. Their sanctuary wouldn't remain secret for long. As they traced back toward the cabin by a different route, Elena insisted on never using the same path twice. Ethan's mind raced with contingency plans. They would need to prepare for confrontation or escape. Elena stopped abruptly, holding up a hand for silence. Straining his ears, Ethan caught what she had already detected, voices, carried faintly on the wind. Elena pointed to a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. Without a word, they squeezed into the tight space, pressing back into shadows. The rough stone scraped against Ethan's back as he flattened against the wall. The voices grew louder. Men, speaking English, 3 of them. Waste of time, one was saying. Wade's probably buzzard food by now. Boss says keep looking, another replied. Says the package is worth 10 times what he's paying us. What's in it anyway? Above your pay grade, Dixon. Just know Gallagher wants it bad, and he ain't a man to disappoint. The speakers came into view. 3 men on horseback, moving slowly through the canyon. Ethan recognized one, Samuel Dixon, a notorious gun for hire. The others were unfamiliar but clearly cut from the same cloth. Hard men with cold eyes who killed for money and asked few questions. Elena and Ethan remained perfectly still as the men passed their hiding place. The space was so narrow that they were pressed together, Elena's back against Ethan's chest. He could feel her controlled breathing, the tension in her body. Only when the voices faded did they emerge from hiding. Back in the open, they exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Their time in the cabin was growing short. They returned in silence, alert for any sign the searchers had changed direction. The safety of the cabin, which had seemed so secure that morning, now felt precarious. As they prepared the rabbit, the tension of their near discovery hung in the air. Finally, as they sat by the fire eating, Elena broke the silence. You ask a photograph, she said abruptly. Of Noah. Ethan looked up in surprise, his food forgotten. Yes. Elena set aside her plate and met his gaze directly. Time for truth, I think. She rose and went to a small leather pouch hanging from a wall peg. From it, she withdrew the photograph Ethan had glimpsed on the night she rescued him. She handed it to him without a word. It was indeed Noah, younger and happier than in Ethan's last memories, smiling broadly at the camera. Beside him stood Elena, her expression more reserved but with unmistakable warmth in her eyes. They stood close, comfortable with each other in a way that spoke volumes. I knew your brother, Elena said softly, watching Ethan study the image. He came to my village 3 years ago, said he was collecting stories from elders, learning Apache ways. That sounds like Noah, Ethan said, his throat tight. He was always curious about other cultures. Elena's eyes took on a distant look, remembering. First white man I meet who listen more than talk, who see Apache as people, not savages or curiosities. Her voice held a warmth that hadn't been there before. He wanted to record stories before they lost. Said history important, all history, not just white man's. How did you two... Ethan hesitated, unsure how to phrase the question. Elena understood. At first I avoid him, not trust any white man, But he, persistent, respectful, would sit for hours with elders, writing every word. A small smile touched her lips. One day, flash flood come. Noah saved child from drowning, my cousin's son, risk his own life. Her fingers traced the edge of the photograph gently. That night, tribe holds ceremony to thank him. He participate, not mock our ways like other whites. She took a deep breath, the memory clearly precious to her. After that, I begin to teach him our language. We talk many hours. He tell me of books, of world beyond mountains. I show him sacred places, teach him desert ways. Her voice softened further. One night under stars, he tell me I'm more beautiful than any woman he ever know. Not just body, but spirit. Elena's eyes met Ethan's, vulnerable yet proud. We fall in love slow, then all at once. Like spring rain that begin as drops, end as flood. Was Gallagher with him? Ethan asked, remembering his brother's position as the judge's clerk. Sometimes, Elena said, her expression darkening. He come with Noah first visits, take pictures, make maps, save for historical record. Noah believed him then. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Maps of what exactly? Our lands, sacred places, hunting grounds. Elena's voice hardened. Weeks later, Gallagher's men come, drive us from certain areas. Say government declare them off limits to Indians. The pieces began falling into place. And those areas, they were valuable somehow. Water, grazing land. Elena's eyes met his. Silver, she said simply, under the ground. My people know of it long time, but it not important to us. To white men, she shrugged expressively. So Gallagher used Noah to find the silver deposits, Ethan said, anger building. Used his interest in your culture to map out valuable land. Yes, Elena confirmed, but Noah learned truth. He found papers in Gallagher's office, false deeds, bribes to officials, planned to claim all land, push Apache to reservation or worse. Ethan's hand tightened on the photograph, and that's why Gallagher had him killed. Elena didn't answer directly, but her silence was confirmation enough. Instead, she said, Noah not just collects stories when he visit. She hesitated, then continued more softly. We become close. The way she said it, the look in her eyes, Ethan understood. His brother and this woman had been more than friends. Noah promised to expose Gallagher, Elena continued, to bring evidence to federal authorities, but her voice faltered. But he never got the chance, Ethan finished, the familiar grief washing over him anew. They sat in silence for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Ethan spoke again. This package I'm carrying, he said slowly, I think it might contain the evidence Noah found, or something like it. Elena looked at him sharply. How will you get it? A lawyer in Tucson hired me to deliver it to the federal office in Cedar Creek. I didn't ask questions, just another job. Ethan shook his head at the irony. But now I wonder if somehow I've been drawn into finishing what Noah started. Elena seemed to read his thoughts. Gallagher, powerful man, many friends, many guns. Not easy to bring him down. No, Ethan agreed grimly. But I've been looking for a way to make him pay for 3 years. If this is it. He left the thought unfinished. Elena studied him for a long moment, then reached across and took back the photograph, her fingers brushing his. There is more you should know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. About Noah and me. Something in her tone made Ethan's heart beat faster. What is it? Elena took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Noah and I, we were in love, met in secret many months. He promised to return after exposing Gallagher, to take me away somewhere safe. Ethan absorbed this with a mix of emotions. Surprise, but also a retroactive happiness for his brother, who had found something meaningful before his untimely end. But Elena wasn't finished. Her eyes, when they met his, held both vulnerability and strength. When Noah die, I carry his child. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan stared at her, unable to process what he'd just heard. A child? He finally managed. Noah's child. Elena nodded solemnly. A daughter. She is 2 years now. Her name is Sarah. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Noah, tell me it was your mother's name. It was, Ethan confirmed, his voice hollow with shock. A niece. He had a niece, a living connection to Noah he never knew existed. Where is she? He asked, a sudden protective urge sweeping through him. Safe, Elena assured him, with my mother's sister, in Hidden Village 2 days' ride north. Place Gallagher's men never find. Ethan sat back, overwhelmed. In the space of an hour, the world had shifted beneath his feet. His quest for justice had always been personal, but now it held greater stakes. Not just vengeance for the past, but protection for the future, for his brother's child. She has his eyes, Elena said softly, watching Ethan's face. His smile. Emotion threatened to choke him. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to maintain composure. I would like to meet her. Someday. If we survive Gallagher, Elena reminded him, her pragmatism reasserting itself. Men in Canyon today mean our time here short. We must decide what to do. Ethan nodded, forcing himself to focus on the immediate threat. You're right, we need a plan. The discovery of Gallagher's men searching the canyons lent new urgency to their situation. Over the next 2 days, Ethan and Elena prepared for their inevitable departure from the cabin that had been their sanctuary. Ethan's wound had healed enough for travel, though it still pulled painfully when he exerted himself. Elena gathered medicines and supplies, packing efficiently, while Ethan maintained watch for any sign that the searchers were drawing near. On the evening of the second day, as they reviewed their plans one final time, Ethan made a decision. We should open the package, he said, nodding toward the sealed parcel. If we're risking our lives for it, we should know exactly what it contains. Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. Truth better than guessing. Ethan retrieved the package and broke the seal, unwrapping the oilcloth covering. Inside lay a collection of papers, carefully organized and bound with twine. He spread them on the table as Elena moved closer to examine them. Land deeds with official-looking stamps. Maps with areas circled and annotated. Correspondence between Gallagher and government officials. Financial records showing large sums changing hands. And most damning, detailed plans for forcing the Apache off their traditional lands and onto distant reservations, far from the silver deposits marked on the maps. Noah was right, Ethan said grimly. Gallagher's been orchestrating a massive land grab. Elena's face had hardened as she looked at the maps. These places, she said, pointing to circled areas, sacred to my people. Burial grounds, medicine sites. Her finger moved to another section. Here is where they drive us from 3 summers ago. Ethan nodded slowly, cold anger building in his chest. And look at this. He held up a land deed with Gallagher's name prominently displayed. The judge has already claimed ownership of most of these areas using falsified documentation. As they examined the papers, Ethan noticed something that made his breath catch. Elena, he said quietly, look at this handwriting. On several maps and in the margins of some documents were notes in a familiar hand. Neat, precise script that Ethan would know anywhere. Noah, he whispered. Elena's fingers touched the writing gently, as if it were a physical connection to the man himself. He make these copies, she said, risk his life to take from Gallagher's office. Ethan nodded, a bittersweet pride filling him. My brother was braver than I ever gave him credit for. Among the papers, Ethan found a letter in an envelope bearing the name James Hollister, Esquerman, the Tucson lawyer who had hired him. Inside was a brief note. Mr. Hollister enclosed, find the evidence I spoke of regarding Judge Gallagher's activities in Apache territory. The original documents remain in his possession, but these copies should suffice to initiate a federal investigation. I fear for my safety, as the judge has begun to suspect my intentions. Should anything happen to me, please ensure these reach the proper authorities. With respect, Noah Wade Ethan stared at his brother's signature, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Noah had known the danger he faced, had prepared for the possibility of his own death. He sent these to Hollister before he was killed, Ethan said, his voice rough. But something must have happened. The lawyer waited 3 years to try to deliver them. Or tried before and failed, Elena suggested. Actually, both, came Abigail's voice from the doorway. They turned to find her standing there with a tray of food. James received these documents a week before Noah was killed. He immediately recognized their importance. and the danger they represented. She set the tray down, her expression somber. James tried sending them to the federal authorities twice in the first year. Both couriers disappeared. One was found dead near the territorial line. The other was never seen again. She sat heavily in a chair. After that, James became more cautious. He spent the next 2 years gathering additional evidence, building connections with officials who couldn't be bought by Gallagher's silver. "Why not take them himself?" Ethan asked. "Gallagher was watching him too closely," Abigail explained. "James knew he was suspected. That's why he used an intermediary to hire you, someone who didn't know the connection to Noah. He hoped that Gallagher wouldn't connect a random courier with the documents." Ethan considered this. "But he knew who I was. He specifically sought out Noah's brother." Abigail nodded. "James believed you'd have the determination to see it through if you knew the truth, and the skills to survive if things went wrong." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He said, "If anyone can outfight Gallagher's thugs, it would be Noah's war hero brother." "Why you?" Elena asked, watching his face carefully. "Coincidence that brother of Noah carries his evidence?" "I've wondered that myself," Ethan admitted. "Hollister never mentioned Noah when he hired me. Never gave his own name, in fact, used an intermediary. Perhaps he didn't know the connection, or perhaps—" He trailed off. "Perhaps he know exactly who you are," Elena finished. "Choose you for reason." The possibility hung between them. If true, it meant Hollister had deliberately drawn Ethan into this dangerous situation, but also that the lawyer had trusted him to complete Noah's mission. Ethan's gaze returned to the documents. These would ruin Gallagher. Not just cost him the land, they proved corruption, bribery of federal officials. He'd face prison at the very least. "If they reach right hands," Elena cautioned. "Yes," Ethan agreed, "and that's the challenge. We need to find someone with the authority and integrity to act on them, and who isn't already in Gallagher's pocket." Elena was silent for a moment, thoughtful. "In Cedar Creek," she said finally, "there is federal judge, Judge Turner. Noah speak of him. Say he honest man, not corrupt like Gallagher." "A federal judge would have the authority," Ethan mused, "but getting to him won't be easy. Gallagher will have men watching all approaches to town." "We not use main roads," Elena said with quiet confidence. "I know ways, secret paths." Ethan studied her, admiring her determination. "It will be dangerous, especially for you. Cedar Creek isn't friendly territory for an Apache woman." "No place is safe while Gallagher lives," she replied simply. "And Sarah deserves better future than hiding forever." The mention of his niece strengthened Ethan's resolve. "You're right, we'll go to Cedar Creek, find Judge Turner, and end Gallagher's reign once and for all." They spent the next hour repacking the documents and finalizing their plans. They would leave at first light, taking a roundabout route to avoid the searchers. As they prepared for sleep, knowing it might be their last night of relative safety, Elena approached Ethan with a small leather pouch on a cord. "Medicine," she explained, offering it to him. "For journey, if wound opens again." Ethan accepted it, touched by the gesture. "Thank you." Their eyes met in the dimming firelight, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged through shared danger and grief. "We should rest," Elena said, breaking the moment. "Long journey tomorrow." As Ethan lay on his cot, the weight of the day's revelations pressed on him. Noah's evidence, Sarah's existence, the dangerous path ahead. He found himself wondering what Noah would think of his older brother now, the restless soldier finding purpose not in wandering, but in seeking justice, in protecting family. "I'll finish what you started, little brother," Ethan whispered into the darkness. "I promise." Outside, the desert wind moaned through the canyons like a distant lament. Tomorrow they would leave their sanctuary and venture into the heart of danger. But tonight, under the blanket of stars, they allowed themselves one last moment of peace before the storm. Dawn broke over the canyon rim, painting the sandstone walls in shades of amber and gold. Ethan stood outside the cabin, watching the light creep across the desert floor. His side ached dully, a persistent reminder of his brush with death. But it was manageable now. He touched the small medicine pouch Elena had given him, hanging from a cord around his neck. Inside, Elena was completing their preparations, organizing supplies with the efficient precision that seemed to define everything she did. They had spent the previous evening plotting their journey to Cedar Creek, weighing options and risks. When Ethan returned inside, Elena looked up from her work. "Almost ready?" she said. "One horse only. Safer than two. Less tracks." Ethan nodded, though the prospect of riding double with Elena for 2 days stirred complicated feelings he wasn't ready to examine. He moved to help her pack the remaining supplies. "How well do you know the territory between here and Cedar Creek?" he asked. "Like my own hand," she replied. "My people hunt these lands for generations. Every canyon, every spring." She rolled a small bundle of herbs and tucked it into her pack. "Many paths white men never find." "And you're certain about this Judge Turner, that he can be trusted?" Elena paused in her work. "Noah trust him. Say Turner, honest man. New to territory, not part of Gallagher's circle." She looked at Ethan directly. "Few choices we have." "I know." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I just wish we had more to go on than the word of a man 3 years dead." As soon as he said it, he regretted his phrasing. Elena's face remained impassive, but her eyes flashed with momentary pain. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean—" "Is truth," she interrupted. "Noah is dead, but his word's still good." She returned to her packing. "Judge Turner, best hope. Maybe only hope." Ethan stood in silence, watching her work. After a moment, he asked the question that had been troubling him since the previous evening. "And Sarah, what if something happens to us?" Elena's hands stilled. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "My aunt will raise her," she said finally, "as Apache, but—" She turned to face Ethan, her expression unusually vulnerable. "If I die, Sarah should know her father's people too, her uncle." The responsibility of it settled on Ethan's shoulders like a physical weight. This child, Noah's child, suddenly depended on him, even if she didn't know it yet. "I'll protect her," he said, his voice low and fervent. "If anything happens to you, I swear I'll find her and keep her safe." Elena studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded once, decisively. "Good." She returned to her preparations, but the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted, an unspoken understanding forming between them. "We should discuss what happens when we reach Cedar Creek," Ethan said, changing the subject. "I can move freely in town, but you will be seen as enemy," Elena finished for him. "I know." She secured a bundle with a leather strap. "I not go into town openly. Wait outside in hills. You find Judge Turner, bring him to meeting place." Ethan frowned. "I don't like the idea of separating." "No choice," she said pragmatically. "Apache woman in Cedar Creek draws attention we not want." "What if Gallagher's men spot you, or some trigger-happy rancher?" "I not be seen," she said with quiet confidence. "Been hiding from white men long time," Ethan weighed. He couldn't argue with that. Still, the thought of Elena waiting alone in the wilderness while he ventured into town, into potential danger, sat uneasily with him. "What about the lawyer, Hollister?" Ethan asked. "If he's still in Cedar Creek, he could help us approach Turner." Elena's expression darkened. "If still alive. Gallagher not kind to enemies." The implication was clear. The lawyer who had sent Noah's evidence might well have met the same fate as Noah himself. They worked in silence for a while, each lost in thought. As the sun climbed higher, the small cabin grew warmer. Ethan moved to the door, seeking the cooler air outside. The landscape stretched before him, harsh and beautiful. In the distance, a hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. This land, he reflected, had been Elena's people's home for centuries before men like Gallagher arrived with their greed and paper claims. Elena joined him, following his gaze across the canyon. For a moment, they stood side by side, contemplating the journey ahead. "Difficult road," she said quietly. "Yes," he agreed. "You could take package, go alone," she suggested, though her tone indicated she already knew his answer. "Safer for you without Apache woman." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, we do this together." He turned to look at her. "This is your fight as much as mine. More, maybe. Your people, your land." He paused. "Your daughter's future." A rare smile touched Elena's lips, brief but genuine. "Our fight, then." "Our fight," Ethan confirmed. They returned inside to complete their preparations. As Elena carefully packed Noah's evidence into a waterproof leather pouch, Ethan checked his gun, counting the remaining bullets. He had 12 rounds, not many if they encountered serious trouble. Elena noticed his concern. "I have these," she said, retrieving a small bundle from her pack. Inside were 6 more bullets that matched his revolver. "Take from man who shoot you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, impressed by her foresight. "You've been planning for this moment since you found me, haven't you?" She shrugged. "Always good to be prepared." By midday, they were ready to leave. They mounted Elena's painted mare together, Ethan behind Elena, the evidence secure inside his jacket. With one last look at the cabin that had been their sanctuary, they rode out into the canyon, leaving no trace of their presence behind. Elena guided the horse with the skill of someone born to the saddle, navigating the complex network of ravines and washes with unerring confidence. Ethan found himself admiring her abilities anew. Though he was no stranger to the frontier, Elena's knowledge of this harsh landscape far surpassed his own. They traveled in companionable silence for much of the afternoon, conserving energy and water. Elena took them on a circuitous route, avoiding the main trails and keeping to areas where the rocky ground would leave minimal tracks. Occasionally, she would point out landmarks or signs, a particular formation of rocks, an unusual cactus, teaching Ethan to read the land as she did. As the sun began to descend toward the western horizon, they reached a small, hidden spring tucked into the side of a cliff. Elena reined in the horse. "We rest here," she said. "Water for horse, then continue until dark." They dismounted, Ethan moving carefully to avoid aggravating his wound. The spring was little more than a trickle emerging from the rock face, collecting in a small stone basin before disappearing into the sand. But the water was clear and cool, a precious resource in the desert. While the horse drank, Elena checked Ethan's wound, her touch professional and impersonal. "Healing well," she pronounced. "No fever. Good sign." "Thanks to your medicine," Ethan acknowledged. She nodded, accepting the compliment as her due. "My father teach well." As Elena repacked her medical supplies, Ethan found himself curious about her life before their paths crossed. "Your father, the medicine man, what was he like?" The question seemed to surprise her, but after a moment's hesitation, she answered. "Wise man, respected by all, know every plant, every cure." A shadow passed over her face. "Also see future sometimes. Have visions." "Visions?" Ethan couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "You not believe," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "Most white men don't." "I've seen too many charlatans claiming to see the future," Ethan explained. "Taking money from the desperate and gullible." Elena regarded him steadily. "My father not take money, his gift real." She looked away toward the setting sun. "He see raid that kills him. Tell me to run when soldiers come. Save my life." Ethan had no response to that. Instead, he asked, "And your mother?" "Die when I young, not remember much, only stories others tell." She finished securing her pack. "We should go, still far to travel before night." They mounted again and continued their journey. The landscape changed gradually as they rode, the towering canyon walls giving way to more open country, though Elena kept them to the shelter of arroyos and ravines whenever possible. As the light faded from the sky, they made camp in a small hollow sheltered by boulders. No fire tonight, too risky with Gallagher's men possibly in the area. They ate a cold meal of jerky and hardtack, sharing the canteen of water. When they had finished eating, Elena took the first watch while Ethan tried to rest. He lay on his bedroll, looking up at the emerging stars, thinking of Noah, of Sarah, of the dangerous days ahead. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. After a while, he sat up, finding Elena perched on a boulder, her silhouette sharp against the night sky. He climbed up to join her, moving carefully in the darkness. "Should be sleeping," she said without turning. "Can't," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." She nodded, understanding without need for explanation. They sat in silence for a time, the desert night alive with subtle sounds around them. The whisper of wind, the distant cry of a coyote, the rustle of some small creature in the brush below. "Tell me about her," Ethan said finally. "About Sarah." Elena's posture softened slightly at the mention of her daughter. "Strong girl, Stubborn. A note of pride entered her voice. Fast learner. Already know many plans. Good eye like her father. Does she know about Noah? I tell her stories. Show photograph. Elena's voice grew quieter. She too young to understand fully. But someday we'll know her father was good man. Brave man. And does she know about me? Ethan asked. Elena hesitated. I tell her she has uncle. Man who fought in Great War. Someday perhaps she meet him. She glanced at Ethan. Not one to give hope that might not come true. Ethan nodded, understanding her caution. When this is over, when Gallagher is brought to justice, I'd like to be part of her life, if you'll allow it. If we survive, Elena reminded him, ever practical. Then yes, Sarah should know father's brother. They fell silent again, each contemplating the uncertain future. After a while, Ethan spoke again. Thank you, he said quietly. Elena turned to look at him, her expression questioning in the moonlight. For giving Noah happiness, he clarified, before the end, for loving him. For once, Elena seemed at a loss for words. Finally, she said simply, he was easy to love. The vulnerability in her voice touched something in Ethan. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her hand with his own. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed, allowing the contact. They remained that way for a long moment, connected by shared grief and shared purpose, beneath the vast canvas of desert stars. You should sleep now, Elena said eventually, gently withdrawing her hand. Long journey tomorrow. This time, when Ethan returned to his bedroll, sleep came swiftly. They rose before dawn and continued their journey as the first light crept into the eastern sky. The terrain grew increasingly familiar to Ethan as they approached Cedar Creek. Rolling hills giving way to scattered ranches and farms, signs of civilization emerging from the wilderness. Elena guided them along hidden routes, skirting the main roads and keeping to the shelter of arroyos and tree lines whenever possible. By midday, they had reached a ridge overlooking the town. Cedar Creek had grown in the 3 years since Ethan had last seen it. New buildings lined the main street, and a freshly constructed rail spur suggested the town was prospering. From their vantage point, they could make out the courthouse where Gallagher presided, the marshal's office, and, dominating the north end of town, a large, ornate house that could only belong to the judge himself. Gallagher does well for himself, Ethan observed grimly. Silver make rich men richer, Elena replied. They retreated from the ridgeline to a small, sheltered hollow where they could rest and finalize their plans. According to Elena, Judge Turner was in town for a circuit court session, scheduled to hear cases for the next 3 days. How do we approach him? Ethan asked. We can't simply walk into the courthouse. Gallagher would have us arrested on sight. Elena unfolded a rough map she had drawn in the dirt. Here, she said, pointing to a building near the courthouse. Boarding house where Turner stay when in town. Woman who own it, Mrs. Abigail Hollister, widow of lawyer. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. Hollister? The lawyer who sent the package. Elena nodded. Same. Noah speak of her. Say she good woman. Help husband with cases sometimes. If she's Hollister's widow, she might be willing to help us, Ethan mused, especially if she knows what happened to her husband. Risky, Elena cautioned. Not know if we can trust. We have few options, Ethan pointed out. And if she was married to the man who tried to expose Gallagher, she's likely no friend to the judge. They discussed the approach further, weighing risks against necessity. Finally, they settled on a plan. Ethan would enter town alone, seek out Mrs. Hollister, and attempt to arrange a meeting with Judge Turner. Elena would remain hidden in the hills, ready to flee if things went wrong. I don't like leaving you alone, Ethan said, echoing his concern from the day before. Better one captured than both, Elena replied pragmatically. If you not return by nightfall, I go to Sarah. The starkness of her contingency plans sobered Ethan. They were playing a dangerous game, with lives hanging in the balance. They waited until dusk when the shadows lengthened and Ethan would be less conspicuous entering town. Before he left, Elena handed him a small knife in a beaded sheath. Hide in boot, she instructed. Never know when need second weapon. Ethan tucked the knife into his boot, touched by her concern. I'll be back before midnight, he promised. With help, if all goes well. Elena's expression remained stoic, but her eyes betrayed her worry. Be careful, Ethan Wade. Gallagher have many eyes in Cedar Creek. With a final nod, Ethan departed, making his way down from the hills toward the town's eastern edge. He kept to the shadows, avoiding the main street as he navigated toward the boarding house Elena had identified. Cedar Creek at night was a study in contrasts. The saloons and gambling halls blazed with light and noise, while respectable establishments stood dark and shuttered. Men in varying states of inebriation stumbled between drinking establishments, and painted women called from balconies. Ethan kept his hat pulled low, his collar turned up, avoiding eye contact as he moved through the streets. The Hollister boarding house was a neat two-story structure set back from the main thoroughfare. A small sign above the door identified it simply as Hollister's rooms. Lights glowed in the downstairs windows, suggesting the proprietress was still awake. Ethan hesitated at the gate, acutely aware of his exposed position. If Gallagher had men watching the boarding house, especially if the judge suspected Mrs. Hollister might be sympathetic to his enemies, Ethan's approach might be observed. But there was no turning back now. He knocked quietly on the front door. After a moment, it opened to reveal a woman in her early 30s, with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She wore a simple dress with an apron, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. "We're full up," she said without preamble. "No vacancies." "I'm not looking for a room, Mrs. Hollister," Ethan replied quietly. "I'm looking for James Hollister." Her expression hardened. "My husband's been dead these 6 months, mister. If you're collecting on a debt—" "I'm not," Ethan interrupted. "I'm the man he hired to deliver a package to the federal office, a package that never arrived." Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, then narrowed with suspicion. She glanced past him to the street, then stepped back. "You better come in." Ethan entered, his senses alert for any sign of a trap. The interior of the boarding house was modest but well kept, with a small parlor off the entryway where a lamp burned low. Mrs. Hollister closed the door firmly behind him and turned, arms crossed. "Who are you?" "Ethan Wade." The name clearly meant something to her. Her posture stiffened. "Wade? Any relation to Noah Wade?" "He was my brother." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing her next words carefully. James spoke of Noah, said he was a brave young man, that his death wasn't the accident it was made out to be. "It wasn't," Ethan confirmed, "and I believe your husband died trying to expose the man responsible." Mrs. Hollister's expression flickered with grief, quickly suppressed. "James went missing 6 months ago, 3 days after he sent that package with a rider to Tucson. They found his body in the wash outside town. Said he fell from his horse, broke his neck." Her voice turned bitter. "James hadn't fallen from a horse in 30 years. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. She waved away his sympathy. "What I want to know is why you're here, Mr. Wade. That package was meant for the federal authorities, not for Cedar Creek, and certainly not for a man with a price on his head." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, a price on my head?" Mrs. Hollister moved to a desk in the corner of the parlor and withdrew a folded paper, which she handed to Ethan. It was a wanted poster, with a crude likeness of his face and the words "Wanted Ethan Wade" in bold letters. The charge, murder of a federal officer. "This is Gallagher's work," Ethan said grimly, refolding the poster. "He knows I have the evidence." "What evidence?" Mrs. Hollister asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Land fraud, corruption, bribery." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "The same evidence your husband tried to bring forward. The evidence my brother died for, Mrs." Hollister sank into a chair, the weight of confirmation seeming to press on her shoulders. "I knew it," she said softly. "I knew James didn't die by accident." "Mrs. Hollister." "Abigail," she corrected automatically. "If we're to be conspirators, we might as well use first names." "Abigail," Ethan amended. "I need to speak with Judge Turner. I understand he's staying here." She nodded slowly. "He has the back room on the second floor." Her eyes narrowed. "But why Turner? Why not go directly to the federal marshal?" "Because we don't know who to trust," Ethan explained. "Noah believed Turner was honest, that he wasn't part of Gallagher's circle." "Noah was right," Abigail confirmed. "Turner's new to the territory, Harvard educated. He and Gallagher have been at odds since Turner arrived. disagreeing on sentencing, land claims, Indian policy. She lowered her voice. James believed Turner might be the only official in Cedar Creek not in Gallagher's pocket. Then you'll help me speak with him? Abigail considered for a moment, then nodded decisively. Yes, but not tonight. Turner's attending a town council meeting at Gallagher's invitation. Some discussion about the new rail contracts. Her expression turned calculating. Tomorrow morning would be better. Turner hears cases starting at 10. He always takes breakfast here at 7 alone. Thank you, Ethan said, relief evident in his voice. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Wade. Abigail's tone was grim. Getting Turner on our side is only the beginning. Gallagher won't go down without a fight, and he has powerful friends. I know the risks, Ethan assured her, but this may be our only chance to bring him to justice. A thought seemed to occur to Abigail. You said our chance. Who else is with you? Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But if they were trusting this woman with their lives, honesty seemed the only course. Noah's friend, an Apache woman named Elena. Understanding dawned in Abigail's eyes. The Indian woman James mentioned. Noah's secret sweetheart. She shook her head slightly. James said there was a child. There is, Ethan confirmed. A little girl named Sarah, my niece. Abigail's expression softened momentarily, then turned businesslike again. Where is Elena now? Waiting in the hills. We agreed I would return by midnight. She can't stay out there, Abigail said firmly. Gallagher's men patrol the hills around town, especially at night. They're supposedly looking for cattle rustlers, but everyone knows they're really there to discourage Apache from returning to their old hunting grounds. Ethan felt a cold knot of worry form in his stomach. If Gallagher's men found Elena alone in the hills, I need to go back for her. No, Abigail countered. That would only increase the risk of both of you being spotted. She thought for a moment. There's a root cellar behind my house. It connects to a storage room under the kitchen. She can hide there until morning. She won't come into town, Ethan said. It's too dangerous for her here. More dangerous out there alone, Abigail insisted. At least here, I can warn you if trouble comes. She moved to a small writing desk and penned a quick note, which she folded and handed to Ethan. Give her this. It explains who I am and why she can trust me. Tell her to come to the back of the house after midnight. 3 knocks, then 2 more. I'll let her in. Ethan tucked the note into his pocket, still uncertain. And if it's a trap? Abigail met his gaze squarely. Mr. Wade, my husband died trying to expose Gallagher. I've spent 6 months pretending to accept the official story of his accident while secretly gathering what evidence I could. I've housed Judge Turner specifically because I hoped he might someday help bring Gallagher to justice. Her voice hardened. I have no love for the man who made me a widow. Her sincerity was persuasive. Ethan nodded, accepting her help. I'll return to Elena now. If she agrees, she'll come to your door after midnight. And you? Better we're not seen together, Ethan reasoned. I'll find a place to stay tonight and meet you here at breakfast. Abigail seemed about to argue, then thought better of it. Very well, but be careful. That poster with your face is all over town. Gallagher's offering $50 for information leading to your capture. I'll keep that in mind, Ethan said grimly. He left as quietly as he had arrived, sticking to the shadows as he made his way back through town. The encounter with Abigail Hollister had been unexpected, but potentially valuable. If Judge Turner was indeed as honest as Noah had believed, they might finally have a chance to bring Gallagher down. But first he had to return to Elena with the new plan, one she might not agree to. The journey back to their meeting place took longer than the descent into town. Ethan moved cautiously, alert for any sign of Gallagher's patrols. Twice he had to freeze in the darkness as riders passed nearby, their voices carrying on the night air. Waste of time. No Apache been seen in these parts for months. Boss says keep looking. Says he got word there might be trouble coming. Ethan's blood ran cold. Had Gallagher somehow learned of their presence? Or was this just routine vigilance from a man with many enemies? When he finally reached the hollow where he had left Elena, he found her waiting exactly as promised, a shadow among shadows. She materialized from the darkness as he approached, her knife already drawn until she recognized him. You took long time, she said, a hint of tension in her voice. Was worried. I met with Abigail Hollister, Ethan explained, keeping his voice low. She's willing to help us reach Judge Turner. Elena listened intently as Ethan recounted his conversation with the widow. When he mentioned the wanted poster with his face, her expression darkened. Gallagher moved fast, she observed. Know you have evidence. It gets worse, Ethan continued. His men are patrolling the hills tonight. Abigail thinks it's too dangerous for you to stay out here. Elena's posture stiffened. I not go into town. Too risky. More risky out here alone, Ethan countered, echoing Abigail's words. She's offering a hiding place, a root cellar connected to her house, just until morning when we can meet with Turner. Elena shook her head firmly. White Town not safe for Apache, especially woman. Better chance in hills. Not with Gallagher's men searching specifically for trouble, Ethan argued. I heard them myself on the way back. They're expecting something. This gave Elena pause. She considered for a moment, then asked, You trust this woman, widow of lawyer? I believe she genuinely wants to bring Gallagher to justice for her husband's murder, Ethan said. And she knew about you, about Sarah. James Hollister must have told her. Elena's expression remained dubious. Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew Abigail's note. She wrote this for you, said to come to the back of her house after midnight if you agree. Elena took the folded paper, studying it in the dim starlight. Though she couldn't read the English words, she seemed to weigh the gesture itself. Very dangerous, she said finally. But, she glanced toward the distant lights of Cedar Creek. Maybe necessary. Relief washed over Ethan. We'll be careful. Go in separately, meet again at breakfast. By this time tomorrow, Turner could be reviewing the evidence. Elena nodded slowly, though her reluctance was clear. Where you stay tonight? Ethan hadn't fully considered that question. With a wanted poster bearing his likeness circulating in town, finding lodging would be challenging. I'll figure something out. Maybe the livery stable or one of the outlying barns. Not good, Elena frowned. Too exposed. I don't have many options, Ethan pointed out. Every hotel and boarding house will have that poster. Elena thought for a moment. Church, she suggested. At edge of town. Noah say priest there, kind man. Help Indians sometimes. It wasn't a bad idea. Churches were often left unlocked, and a sympathetic priest might turn a blind eye to a man seeking sanctuary for a single night. Worth trying, Ethan agreed. I'll head there now. You wait until after midnight, then go to Hollister's. Just as she instructed. 3 knocks, then 2 more. Elena nodded, committing the signal to memory. If something wrong, if trap, I not be taken alive. The quiet determination in her voice sent a chill through Ethan. It won't come to that, he promised, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. They stood in silence for a moment, both acutely aware that this could be the last time they saw each other. Tomorrow would determine whether they succeeded in their mission or met the same fate as Noah and James Hollister. Be careful, Ethan said finally. You also, Elena replied. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out and clasped his arm briefly, a warrior's farewell. For Noah, Ethan echoed, and for Sarah. With that, they parted ways once more, each heading towards Cedar Creek by different paths, carrying the weight of shared purpose and shared peril into the uncertain night. While Ethan and Elena made their separate ways into Cedar Creek, across town in his opulent office, Judge Harrison Gallagher paced like a caged predator. At 58, Gallagher cut an imposing figure. Tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to power. His office reflected his status, rich leather furnishings, bookshelves lined with legal tomes, and a massive oak desk that dominated the room. But tonight, the judge's usual composure had abandoned him. He paused at the window, staring out at the town that had become his personal fiefdom, a tumbler of whiskey clutched in his hand. You're certain it was Wade? He demanded, not turning to face the man seated behind him. Samuel Dixon, Gallagher's chief enforcer, shifted in his chair. The description matches, Judge. 6 feet tall, dark hair, scar along the jawline. Seen entering the Hollister woman's boarding house not an hour ago. Gallagher drained his whiskey and slammed the empty glass down on his desk. Damn it all to hell. 3 years I've worked to bury this business, and now he shows up with that damn package. He turned to Dixon, his expression thunderous. How did he survive? Your men said they wounded him in the desert, said he couldn't have lasted a day out there. Dixon had the good sense to look uncomfortable. The desert's a strange place, Judge. Men who should die sometimes don't, and those who should live. He left the implication hanging. Poetic, Gallagher sneered. But poetry won't save us if Wade reaches Turner with those documents. The mention of Judge Marshall Turner seemed to darken Gallagher's mood further. The federal judge had been a thorn in his side since arriving in the territory, incorruptible, by all accounts, and inconveniently dedicated to the letter of the law. What about the Indian woman? Gallagher asked suddenly. The one Wade's brother was so fond of. Any sign of her? Dixon shook his head. Not in town, but if Wade's here, she might not be far. The men are searching the hills now. Gallagher nodded distractedly, his mind already racing ahead. He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a photograph. A young man and an Apache woman standing side by side, an unlikely pair. Noah Wade and his secret lover. Wade must not reach Turner, Gallagher said, more to himself than to Dixon. The silver operations are too close to fruition. The territorial governorship too close at hand. He turned to his enforcer. Double the patrols. Watch the boarding house. If Wade makes a move toward the courthouse or Turner's chambers, take him. Dead or alive? Dixon asked, the question perfunctory. They both knew the answer. Live, if possible, Gallagher replied, surprising his lieutenant. I want to know who else has seen those documents. Who else knows? A cold smile touched his lips. But if alive proves impractical, dead will suffice. Dixon nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he paused. And the woman? If we find her? Gallagher studied the photograph again, his expression calculating. Bring her to me, unharmed. His voice hardened. She may be useful leverage against Wade, and I have questions about the child. Dixon's eyebrows rose slightly, but he knew better than to ask for clarification. With a nod of acknowledgement, he departed to carry out his orders, leaving Gallagher alone with his thoughts. The judge returned to the window, staring out at the town he had spent years bending to his will. From this vantage point, he could see the rail station where silver ore from his mines was loaded onto eastbound trains. He could see the courthouse where he dispensed his particular brand of justice. He could see the future he had built, brick by bloody brick. He had not come this far, sacrificed so much, to be undone now by a drifter seeking vengeance for a long-dead brother. By morning, Ethan Wade would be neutralized, one way or another, and the evidence that could destroy everything would be back in Gallagher's hands, where it belonged. The judge poured himself another whiskey, his decision made. Tomorrow would determine the fate of Cedar Creek and all who dwelled there. Tomorrow, the final obstacle to his ambitions would be removed. And if innocent blood had to be spilled to secure that future, well, that was simply the price of progress. The old church at the edge of Cedar Creek stood like a forgotten sentinel against the night sky. Its weathered steeple pointed accusingly at the stars, while its windows remained dark, save for a single candle flickering in the back room. Ethan had found the side door unlocked, just as Elena had suggested. Inside, the church was empty, the pews casting long shadows in the moonlight filtering through stained glass. Father Michael, a thin, gray-haired man with kind eyes set in a careworn face, had been startled to find Ethan in his church but hadn't turned him away. Instead, after hearing a carefully edited version of Ethan's situation, the priest had offered him sanctuary for the night in a small room off the vestry. I can't say I approve of men who live by the gun, Mr. Wade, Father Michael had said, but Judge Gallagher's justice has always seemed more concerned with power than righteousness. You can stay until morning. After that, you're in God's hands. Now, alone in the sparse room with its narrow cot and single candle, Ethan found himself unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. Tomorrow could bring justice or death, perhaps both. He took out the package of evidence, examining it carefully in the candlelight. These papers, these maps and deeds with their neat official stamps and signatures had cost his brother's life, had cost James Hollister's life. Would they cost more before justice was finally served? A sound at the door made him tense, his hand automatically reaching for his gun. Just me, came Father Michael's soft voice. The priest entered, carrying a small tray with bread, cheese, and a cup of water. Thought you might be hungry. Ethan relaxed slightly. Thank you, Father. The priest set the tray down on a small table. His eyes fell on the documents spread across the cot, but he made no comment respecting Ethan's privacy. Instead, he asked, "Is there anything else you need, my son?" Ethan shook his head. "You've done more than enough." Father Michael nodded, turning to leave, then hesitated. "I knew your brother, you know. Noah used to come to services sometimes, though I don't think he was particularly religious. He came to talk about the Apache, their beliefs, their stories. He had great respect for their ways." The mention of Noah brought a sharp pang of grief. That sounds like him. Always curious about people different from himself. "He spoke of you once," the priest continued. "Said you were a good man who'd seen too much darkness in the war, that you were searching for something you couldn't name." Ethan looked away, uncomfortable with the insight. "Noah always did think better of me than I deserved." "Perhaps." Father Michael's tone was gentle. "Or perhaps he saw the man you could be, rather than the man you believed yourself to be." The words hung in the silence between them. Finally, the priest said, "I'll leave you to your rest. May God watch over you tomorrow, Mr. Wade." "I appreciate the sentiment," Father Ethan replied, "but in my experience, God doesn't intervene in the affairs of men, especially men like me." "Then perhaps it is time you gave him the opportunity." With that enigmatic comment, Father Michael withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. Alone again, Ethan picked at the food, his mind too full for appetite. He thought of Elena making her way to Abigail Hollister's back door, risking everything on the word of strangers. He thought of Sarah, the niece he had never met, waiting with Elena's aunt in a hidden Apache village. He thought of Noah, dying in the dusty street of Cedar Creek, his blood staining Ethan's hands. Outside the window, the moon had risen fully, casting silver light across the small churchyard. In the distance, Ethan could see the silhouette of Gallagher's mansion on the hill, lights still burning in its windows despite the late hour. The judge was awake too, perhaps sensing the approaching threat to his empire. Ethan carefully repacked the evidence, securing it inside his shirt. Whatever tomorrow brought, he would face it with clear purpose: to finish what Noah had started, to protect Sarah's future, to bring justice to those who had died seeking it. With that resolve firmly in mind, he finally allowed himself to rest, the candle burning low beside him as the night deepened toward dawn. Morning came with a gentle knock at the door. Father Michael entered, his expression grave. "There are men in town looking for you, Mr. Wade, armed men. They've been showing your wanted poster in all the establishments." Ethan was already pulling on his boots. "Gallagher's men?" "Most likely. Judge Gallagher has the sheriff in his pocket." The priest hesitated. "Whatever you intend to do today, I suggest you move quickly." "I plan to," Ethan assured him, checking his gun before sliding it into his holster. "Thank you for the shelter, Father." Father Michael nodded. "There's a back path through the cemetery that leads to an alley behind the boarding houses. Less chance of being seen that way." Ethan followed the priest's directions, moving swiftly through the morning shadows. The town was beginning to stir, shopkeepers opening their doors, early risers heading to the diner for breakfast, a wagon loaded with supplies rumbling down the main street. Perfect camouflage for a man who didn't want to be noticed. He reached the Hollister boarding house without incident, approaching from the rear as Father Michael had suggested. A quick reconnaissance revealed no obvious watchers, though Ethan remained wary. If Gallagher knew he was in town, the judge would certainly have men watching Abigail's establishment. He rapped softly at the back door. 3 knocks, the same signal Elena had used the night before. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Abigail, already dressed for the day in a simple but elegant dark blue dress. "You're right on time," she said, ushering him inside. "Judge Turner is taking breakfast in the private dining room. Elena is waiting there as well." The news that Elena had made it safely to the boarding house lifted a weight from Ethan's shoulders. He followed Abigail through the kitchen and down a short hallway to a small, well-appointed dining room. Elena sat at a table with a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s. She was dressed in clothes Abigail must have provided, a simple brown skirt and white blouse, her long hair tied back in a neat braid. The change made her look less obviously Apache, though her features would still mark her as Native American to any observer. The man rose as Ethan entered, tall, lean, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were sharp and assessing, taking in Ethan's travel-worn appearance with a single glance. "Mr. Wade, I presume," he said, his voice cultured, with the hint of an Eastern accent. "I'm Judge Marshall Turner. Your companion has been explaining your situation." Ethan nodded respectfully. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Your Honor." "I haven't agreed to anything yet," Turner corrected, though his tone remained cordial. "I've simply listened to an extraordinary tale of corruption and murder. Mrs. Hollister vouches for you both, which counts for something. But accusations against a fellow judge are serious matters. I'll need more than hearsay." "We have more," Ethan assured him, withdrawing the package from inside his shirt. "The evidence Noah collected, the same evidence James Hollister tried to bring to light." He placed the package on the table. Judge Turner regarded it thoughtfully, then gestured for Ethan to open it. As the documents were spread before him, the judge's expression grew increasingly grave. He examined each paper meticulously, his legal mind clearly cataloging the implications. "These land deeds," Turner murmured, "they appear genuine. The signatures of territorial officials, the seals." He looked up sharply. "But the dates have been altered. And these maps," he tapped one of the annotated surveys. "These silver deposits were discovered in 73, not 70 as the official record states. That's how Gallagher claimed the land before the Apache knew its value." "My people knew of silver," Elena interjected quietly. "But to us, it's just stone, not worth blood." Turner nodded thoughtfully. "The legal implications here are significant. If these documents are authenticated, they prove systematic fraud and corruption reaching to the highest levels of territorial government." He fixed Ethan with a penetrating gaze. "You realize, of course, that bringing these allegations forward will make you powerful enemies. Not just Gallagher, but the men he's bribed and partnered with." "I've been living with Gallagher's enmity for 3 years," Ethan replied. "Ever since he had my brother killed for discovering these same documents." Turner considered this, then turned to Abigail. "Mrs. Hollister, would you be willing to testify regarding your husband's involvement in this matter?" "I would," she answered without hesitation. "James gave his life trying to expose this corruption. I owe it to his memory to finish what he started." "And you, Miss Elena?" Turner asked. "Would you testify about the forced removal of your people from these lands?" Elena's expression remained stoic, but her eyes betrayed her discomfort. "White man's court's not kind to Apache woman. But for Noah's child, for my people, yes, I testify." Turner nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Very well, I'll need time to review these documents thoroughly and prepare the necessary legal actions. This cannot be rushed if justice is to be properly served." "How much time?" Ethan asked, trying to hide his impatience. "A day, perhaps 2, Turner replied. "I'll need to wire the territorial capital for assistance. This is beyond the jurisdiction of a single circuit judge." He began gathering the documents, carefully replacing them in their protective wrapping. "I'll keep these safe until then." A sudden uneasiness rippled through Ethan. "With all due respect, Your Honor, those documents have already cost 2 men their lives. Perhaps they should remain with us until formal proceedings begin." Turner regarded him with a mixture of understanding and mild rebuke. "Mr. Wade, I appreciate your concern, but I cannot initiate federal action based on evidence that remains in private hands. The chain of custody must be established properly if these documents are to stand up in court." His tone softened slightly. "I understand your distrust, but I assure you they will be secure in my possession." Ethan glanced at Elena, whose face revealed nothing, though he suspected she shared his misgivings. But they had come too far to turn back now. If they couldn't trust Judge Turner, they had no hope of bringing Gallagher to justice through legal means. "Very well," Ethan conceded. "What would you have us do in the meantime?" "Stay out of sight," Turner advised. "Both of you. Mrs. Hollister has kindly offered the use of her root cellar as a temporary hiding place. It's not comfortable, but it's secure." "And what of Gallagher?" Ethan pressed. "If he suspects what we're doing, Judge Gallagher will be occupied with court proceedings all day," Turner assured him. "I've made certain of it. By the time he realizes what's happening, federal authorities will be involved." The plan seemed sound, but Ethan couldn't shake his sense of foreboding. They were putting all their trust in a man they barely knew, on the strength of Noah's belief in his integrity. I should return to my chambers, Turner said, rising from the table with the package tucked securely under his arm. The court session begins at 10. Mrs. Hollister, thank you for your hospitality. Of course, Judge Turner, Abigail replied with a respectful nod. Turner paused at the door, looking back at Ethan and Elena. What you've done requires considerable courage. Few would risk so much to expose such powerful corruption. When this is over, I hope you find the peace you seek. With those parting words, he left, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Abigail followed to see him out, leaving Ethan and Elena alone in the dining room. You not trust him, Elena observed quietly. I want to, Ethan admitted, but handing over the only evidence we have? He shook his head. It doesn't sit right. Noah trust him, Elena reminded him. Say Turner honest man. Noah trusted Gallagher once too, Ethan pointed out grimly. Their conversation was interrupted by Abigail's return. Her face was flushed with excitement. It's happening, she said. After all this time, James will finally have justice. Ethan wished he could share her certainty. Gallagher won't go down without a fight, he warned, and he has men watching the town. Which is why you both need to stay hidden, Abigail insisted. The root cellar is prepared. It's not much, but there's food, water, and blankets. Once Judge Turner contacts the federal authorities, you'll be safe. Reluctantly, Ethan and Elena followed Abigail to the kitchen, where a trap door in the floor led to the root cellar below. The space was cramped and musty, lit only by a single lantern Abigail provided. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with preserves and root vegetables. A small pallet had been made up in one corner, with blankets and a pitcher of water nearby. I'll check on you periodically, Abigail promised as they descended the narrow stairs, but you must remain absolutely quiet. I have boarders who use the kitchen throughout the day. Thank you, Mrs. Hollister, Ethan said, for everything. Abigail's expression softened. James would have done the same for you. We both believed in justice, even when it seemed impossible. She paused, then added, if anything happens, if you need to leave quickly, there's a tunnel that leads from the back of the cellar to the alley behind the livery stable. It was part of the old mining operations before the town was built. James showed it to me when we first arrived in Cedar Creek. With that, she closed the trap door, leaving them in the dim lantern light. Ethan and Elena settled on the pallet, their backs against the cool earthen wall. The space was tight, forcing them to sit close together, shoulders touching. And now we wait, Ethan murmured. Always hardest part, Elena agreed. Hours passed with excruciating slowness. They spoke little, both lost in their own thoughts. Occasionally, they could hear footsteps overhead as Abigail went about her day, but no word came from above. The air in the cellar grew increasingly stale, and the lantern burned low, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn walls. By Ethan's estimation, it was late afternoon when they heard a commotion above. Raised voices, heavy footsteps. He and Elena exchanged alarmed glances, both instinctively reaching for their weapons. The trapdoor flew open, flooding the cellar with harsh light. Abigail's face appeared, her expression panicked. Run, she hissed. They're here, Gallagher's men. Before either of them could react, Abigail was roughly pulled away, her scream cut short. A man's face appeared in the opening, the pockmarked visage of Samuel Dixon, Gallagher's enforcer. Well, well, Dixon drawled, his voice thick with satisfaction. Look what we have here. The judge said you'd be hiding like rats in a hole there. He aimed his pistol at them. Come on up. Nice and slow. Hands where I can see them. Ethan's mind raced, evaluating their options. The cellar offered no cover, nowhere to hide. Their only hope was the tunnel Abigail had mentioned. Elena, he said quietly. On my signal, run for the back. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, her body tensing for action. I won't ask again, Dixon warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. Ethan moved with explosive speed, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. His bullet caught Dixon in the shoulder, spinning the man away from the trap door with a howl of pain. Now, Ethan shouted, pushing Elena toward the back of the cellar. They scrambled in the semi-darkness, searching for the entrance to the tunnel. Elena found it first, a narrow opening behind a set of shelves, partially concealed by stacked crates. They squeezed through just as boots thundered down the cellar stairs behind them. The tunnel was a tight fit, forcing them to move in a hunched position. It smelled of damp earth and decay, the air heavy with decades of disuse. Ethan went first, his gun drawn, with Elena close behind. They could hear shouts echoing from the cellar, Dixon ordering his men to follow. "Faster," Ethan urged. "They're right behind us." The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning beneath the streets of Cedar Creek. In places, the ceiling had partially collapsed, forcing them to crawl through narrow gaps. The sound of pursuit faded momentarily, then grew louder again as Dixon's men found their trail. Just when Ethan feared they might be trapped in an underground maze, the tunnel began to slope upward. Ahead, he could see a faint glimmer of light filtering through what appeared to be a wooden hatch. They reached it, gasping for breath, pushing against the weathered planks until they gave way. They emerged behind the livery stable, just as Abigail had promised. The alley was mercifully empty, though they could hear the normal bustle of Cedar Creek's main street nearby. Ethan helped Elena out of the tunnel, then quickly surveyed their surroundings. "We need to get out of town," he said urgently. "Find horses. Head for the hills." "No," Elena replied, her expression resolute. "First get evidence back. Without it, all for nothing." She was right, Ethan realized. Turner had the package, the only proof of Gallagher's crimes. Without it, they had nothing but accusations that would never stand in court. "Turner's chambers are in the courthouse," Hunt said, mentally mapping their position in relation to their target. 2 blocks east. But if this is a trap, if Turner betrayed us, then he with Gallagher, Elena finished grimly, and evidence already lost. A shout from the direction of the tunnel entrance made the decision for emergency. "There they are!" Dixon's voice strained with pain and rage. "Don't let them reach the courthouse." Ethan grabbed Elena's hand. "Run!" They sprinted down the alley, emerging onto a side street filled with startled pedestrians. Behind them, Dixon's men gave chase, shoving people aside in their pursuit. Ahead loomed the courthouse, its imposing facade promising either salvation or doom. "This way!" Ethan pulled Elena toward a narrow passage between buildings. "We'll circle around. Come in through the back." They darted through the labyrinthine back streets of Cedar Creek, using the town's layout to their advantage. Ethan had studied these streets 3 years ago, when he first returned seeking answers about Noah's death. Now that knowledge might save their lives. They reached the rear of the courthouse, breathing hard from their flight. A service entrance stood ajar. Too convenient, Ethan thought with mounting suspicion. He drew his gun. "Be ready for anything," he warned Elena, who nodded, drawing her knife from its hidden sheath. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dim corridor lined with office doors. The building seemed unusually quiet for the middle of a court day. No clerks hurrying with documents, no lawyers conferring in hushed tones. Only silence, broken by the distant sound of pursuit from outside. Turner's chambers should be at the end of the hall, the most prestigious office befitting a federal judge. They moved cautiously toward it, every sense alert for danger. The door to Turner's office stood slightly open, another warning sign that Ethan couldn't ignore. He motioned for Elena to stay back, then approached cautiously, gun at the ready. With a swift motion, he pushed the door open fully, prepared to fire. The sight that greeted him froze the blood in his veins. Judge Marshall Turner lay slumped across his desk, a pool of blood spreading from beneath his head. The package of evidence was nowhere to be seen. Elena gasped softly behind him. "Trap," she whispered. "All trap." The sound of slow, deliberate applause came from the shadows of the room. A figure stepped forward, tall, distinguished, with the unmistakable air of authority. Judge Harrison Gallagher. "Mr. Wade," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "And the Apache woman, how very punctual of you both." He gestured casually toward Turner's auto. "I'm afraid the good judge had an unfortunate accident while reviewing some sensitive documents. A tragic loss to the judiciary." Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger, but Gallagher seemed unconcerned by the threat. "I wouldn't if I were you," the judge advised. "My men have the building surrounded. One shot and they'll come running. You'll never leave Cedar Creek alive." "You killed Turner," Ethan said, his voice tight with fury. "Just like you killed Noah. Just like you killed James Hollister." Gallagher shrugged, the gesture almost elegant in its callousness. "Progress requires sacrifice, Mr. Wade. Surely a man who fought in the war understands that concept." He moved to the window, gazing out at the town below. Look out there. Cedar Creek was nothing before I arrived. A dusty stopover for cattle drives and the occasional prospector. Now it's the hub of the most productive silver mining operation in the territory. Built on stolen land, Elena interjected, her voice cold with hatred. On blood of my people. Gallagher turned to regard her, his expression calculating. Ah, yes, the Apache woman. Noah's little indiscretion. His lips curled in a smile that never reached his eyes. I knew about you two, you know. Had Noah followed after he started asking too many questions about the land surveys. Imagine my surprise when my man reported that the clerk was consorting with a savage. Ethan took a step forward, his gun still trained on Gallagher. Where's the evidence? Safe, Gallagher replied. Along with Mrs. Hollister, I might add. She's quite distressed about her role in this unfortunate business. Apparently, she never expected things to become so messy. If you've heard her, Ethan began. She's unharmed, Gallagher interrupted dismissively. For now, her fate, like yours, depends entirely on our next conversation. The judge moved to Turner's desk, casually avoiding the spreading pool of blood, and sat on the edge, regarding Ethan and Elena with cold calculation. I know you didn't come alone. Someone helped you survive that ambush in the desert. Someone helped you reach Cedar Creek undetected. I want names. I want to know who else has seen the evidence. Go to hell, Ethan growled. Gallagher sighed, as if disappointed by such predictable defiance. I thought you might say that, which is why I arranged a little insurance. He raised his voice slightly. Sheriff, bring in our guest. The door behind them opened, and Sheriff Daniel Cooper entered, shoving a bound and gagged Abigail Hollister before him. Her face was bruised, her eyes wide with terror. Mrs. Hollister has been most helpful, Gallagher continued conversationally. She confirmed that the two of you arrived separately, that you met with Turner this morning, and that the evidence was handed over to him. His eyes hardened. What she couldn't tell me was where you've hidden the child. Elena stiffened beside Ethan, her hand tightening on her knife. Oh yes, Gallagher said, noting her reaction with satisfaction. I know about the half-breed brat, Noah's little legacy. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. Where is she? How? Elena demanded, her voice barely controlled. How do you know of Sarah? Gallagher's smile widened. You think your people are loyal? 6 months ago, I had one of your tribesmen in my jail. Broken Arrow was his name. Caught stealing cattle, he claimed. The judge's eyes gleamed with malice. Amazing what a man will reveal when faced with the hangman's noose. He told me everything about Noah's Apache woman and their child, hidden away in the mountains. Even described the girl. Has her father's eyes, I understand. Elena's face went rigid with recognition. Broken Arrow, a bitter man who had been cast out of their tribe for theft and dishonesty. Of course he would sell such information for his freedom. Safe from you, Elena spat, her body coiled with tension. No one is safe from me, Gallagher corrected her. Not in this territory, not while I still breathe. He straightened, adjusting his immaculate cuffs. But perhaps we can reach an accommodation. The child for your lives. Never did he him, Elena hissed, a mother's fierce protection in her voice. Gallagher regarded her thoughtfully. Loyalty, admirable if misguided. He turned to Sheriff Cooper. Take Mrs. Hollister back to her room. Ensure she's comfortable. She may yet prove useful. As Cooper dragged Abigail from the room, Gallagher returned his attention to Ethan and Elena. You have until sundown to reconsider my offer. After that, I'm afraid I can no longer guarantee Mrs. Hollister's safety. Or your own. Ethan's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this trap. Turner was dead. The evidence was gone. Abigail was captive. Their options were dwindling rapidly. Even if you kill us, he said, playing for time, others know what you've done. The federal authorities will receive a full report of how the notorious outlaw Ethan Wade murdered Judge Turner in cold blood. Gallagher interrupted smoothly. How the brave Sheriff Cooper was forced to shoot Wade while attempting to apprehend him. A tragic episode of frontier justice soon forgotten. He smiled coldly. Or perhaps they'll believe that Apache raiders attacked the courthouse. After all, tensions have been high since Little Bighorn. People are quick to believe the worst about savages. His casual racism made Ethan's blood boil, but he forced himself to remain calm. Losing control now would only play into Gallagher's hands. You've thought of everything, he acknowledged, his mind still searching for a weakness, an opening. I always do, Mr. Wade. It's why I've succeeded where others fail. Gallagher glanced at his pocket watch. I have appointments to keep. Think carefully about my offer. The child for your lives. Sundown at my estate. He moved toward a side door. Sheriff Cooper will escort you out. Try not to make a scene. I'd hate to have to explain more bodies to the territorial governor. With those parting words, Gallagher slipped through the door, leaving them alone with Turner's cooling body. Moments later, Cooper returned, his hand on his gun. Time to go, the sheriff said gruffly. The judge wants you out the back way. Less questions that way. Ethan and Elena exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication passing between them. They allowed Cooper to herd them back into the hallway and toward the service entrance. The sheriff kept a careful distance, his revolver trained steadily on Ethan's back. You're a lawman, Ethan said over his shoulder as they walked. How can you be part of this? Murder, kidnapping, extortion? Cooper's voice was flat, emotionless. Man's got to choose sides in this world, Wade. Gallagher's the winning side in Cedar Creek. Has been for years. And what happens when his crimes come to light, Ethan pressed, when the territorial governor learns what's been happening here? Gallagher is going to be the territorial governor, Cooper replied with grim certainty. Man's got connections all the way to Washington. This silver operation is just the beginning. They reached the service entrance. Cooper gestured with his gun. Out, both of you. The judge said to let you think about his offer, so that's what I'm doing. But try anything stupid, and I'll shoot you where you stand. Ethan and Elena stepped outside into the late afternoon sunlight. The alley behind the courthouse was deserted, though they could hear the normal sounds of town life from the main street beyond. Remember, Cooper said as he prepared to close the door. Sundown, the judge's estate, the child for your lives. He paused, then added almost reluctantly, for what it's worth, I'd take the deal. Gallagher always keeps his word. Just like he kept his word to Noah? Ethan asked bitterly. To James Hollister? To Judge Turner? Cooper's expression flickered briefly, the first sign of uncertainty Ethan had seen in the man, but it was quickly suppressed. Your choice, the sheriff said flatly, and closed the door. Alone in the alley, Ethan and Elena stood in stunned silence, the full weight of their situation settling upon them like a physical burden. Turner dead, Elena said softly. Evidence gone. Abigail captive. And Gallagher knows about Sarah, Ethan added, his voice tight with controlled fury. How? How could he know? Elena's expression was grim. Spies, informants, many ways. She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the same determination he felt. We not give him Sarah. Never. Never, Ethan agreed firmly, but we need a plan. Gallagher thinks he's won, that we have no options left. That gives us one advantage. He might underestimate what we're willing to do. Elena nodded, her face set with resolve. Then we show him. Tonight. At his house. A plan began to form in Ethan's mind. Desperate, dangerous, but possibly their only chance. We'll need help, he said, and I think I know where to find it. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they slipped away from the courthouse, keeping to the shadows. Their destination, the church at the edge of town, where Father Michael might yet offer sanctuary to two souls in desperate need of divine intervention. Behind them, the courthouse stood silent and imposing, hiding its bloody secrets behind a facade of law and order. And somewhere within its walls, an innocent woman awaited either rescue or death, her fate entwined with theirs in Gallagher's deadly game. Father Michael's reaction to their story was one of horror mingled with grim acceptance, as if he had long suspected the darkness lurking beneath Cedar Creek's respectable surface. Judge Turner murdered, he murmured, crossing himself. God have mercy on his soul. He regarded Ethan and Elena with troubled eyes. And now Gallagher demands the child in exchange for your lives, for Mrs. Hollister's life. A deal we have no intention of accepting, Ethan assured him, but we need help to free Abigail and escape with our lives. The priest moved to the window of his modest living quarters, looking out at the town spreading below the church. In the distance, Gallagher's mansion stood on its hill, commanding the landscape like a fortress. I have little to offer beyond prayers, Father Michael said sadly. I am but one old man against Gallagher's many gunmen. Prayers will take, Ethan replied, but we also need information. The layout of Gallagher's estate, the number of guards, any weaknesses in his security. Father Michael considered this, then nodded slowly. As the town's priest, I have visited most homes in Cedar Creek, Gallagher's included. I can tell you what I know, though it may not be much. Over the next hour, the priest sketched a rough map of the judge's estate, the main house with its grand entrance and sweeping staircase, the servants' quarters at the rear, the stables off to one side. He marked the likely locations of guards and suggested a possible approach through the kitchen gardens, where the walls were lower and partially concealed by trees. Gallagher keeps a study on the ground floor, Father Michael explained, indicating the location on his sketch. That's where he conducts most of his business. If he's holding Mrs. Hollister somewhere in the house, it's likely in one of the upper rooms. There are several that could serve as makeshift cells. And the evidence? Ethan asked. Where would he keep something like that? There's a safe in his study, the priest replied, behind a painting of the first territorial governor. I've seen him open it once when he was making a donation to the church building fund. His expression turned wry. Gallagher likes to be seen as a benefactor of the community, even as he corrupts its soul. Elena, who had been silent during much of this exchange, finally spoke. Need distraction. Draw guards away from house. Father Michael nodded thoughtfully. There are still good people in Cedar Creek, those who have suffered under Gallagher's rule. The Wilkins family lost their ranch to his fraudulent land claims. The Mendez brothers were beaten by his men for refusing to sell their store. If approached carefully, they might be willing to help create a diversion. It's too risky to involve others, Ethan objected. Gallagher would retaliate against them afterward. Not if Gallagher no longer in position to retaliate, Elena pointed out, her meaning clear. The priest looked troubled by the implication. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, my children. This isn't about vengeance, Ethan clarified, though a part of him knew that wasn't entirely true. It's about justice, about stopping a man who has murdered and stolen with impunity, about protecting an innocent child from his reach. Father Michael sighed heavily. I cannot condone violence, even against one as corrupt as Gallagher, but neither can I stand by while more innocents suffer. He rose, decision made. I will speak with those I trust, arrange for a distraction at the appointed hour. The rest is in your hands, and God's. As the priest prepared to leave on his discreet mission, Ethan turned to Elena. We still need weapons, supplies, and a way into Gallagher's estate that won't get us shot on sight. Elena's expression was thoughtful. Servants, she suggested. Kitchen workers, stable hands, they come and go, less noticed. Good thinking, Ethan agreed. Father Michael mentioned servants' quarters at the rear of the property. If we could get our hands on some appropriate clothes. Church donations, Elena said, nodding toward a basket of clothing in the corner of the room. People give to poor. We now poor. Despite the gravity of their situation, Ethan found himself smiling at her practical approach. They sorted through the donated clothing, finding items that might pass for servants' attire with some minor adjustments. By the time Father Michael returned, the sun was low on the horizon, painting Cedar Creek in hues of gold and amber. The priest looked tired but satisfied. It's arranged, he said simply. At 8 o'clock, there will be a disturbance at the Silver Dollar Saloon, a fistfight that will escalate into something more serious. Sheriff Cooper will be called to intervene, likely taking several of Gallagher's men with him. That gives us our window, Ethan said, checking his gun one last time. We'll approach from the rear, as we discussed, using the servants' entrance. Once inside, we find Abigail, free her, and search for the evidence if time permits. And if Gallagher there? Elena asked, the unspoken question hanging between them. Ethan's expression hardened. Then he answers for his crimes, one way or another. Father Michael made the sign of the cross, murmuring a prayer. May God forgive us all for what must be done. He reached into his robes and withdrew a small flask. Holy water, he explained, offering it to them, for blessing and protection. Elena accepted the flask with solemn reverence, tucking it inside her borrowed servant's dress. The gesture seemed to surprise the priest, who had perhaps expected resistance from a woman raised in a different spiritual tradition. My father was medicine man, Elena explained, seeing his expression. He teach me respect for all powers. All paths to Creator. Father Michael nodded with newfound understanding. Different paths, same destination. He turned to Ethan. And you, my son, will you accept a blessing before your journey? Ethan hesitated, his complicated relationship with faith making him reluctant. But something in the priest's gentle eyes broke through his resistance. I would, he said finally. Thank you, Father. As the priest's weathered hands came to rest briefly on his head, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. Not faith exactly, but something adjacent to it. A recognition that whatever happened tonight, they were fighting for something larger than themselves. For Noah's memory, for Sarah's future, for justice in a land too often bereft of it. With night falling fast, they prepared to leave the sanctuary of the church. Father Michael saw them to the door, his expression solemn. Remember, he said quietly, violence begets violence. If there is another way, any other way, to achieve your ends without bloodshed, I implore you to take it. We'll try, Ethan promised, though in his heart he doubted such a path existed, not with a man like Gallagher. They slipped away from the church, two shadows among many as darkness claimed Cedar Creek. Ahead loomed Gallagher's hilltop mansion, windows ablaze with light, as if the judge were hosting a celebration rather than orchestrating murder and extortion. The hour of reckoning had arrived. By dawn, either justice would be served, or they would join the growing list of those who had died trying to expose Harrison Gallagher's crimes. Either way, the long shadow he had cast over their lives was about to meet the light of truth and judgment. The approach to Gallagher's estate through the servants' entrance proved easier than expected. The distraction at the Silver Dollar Saloon had worked perfectly. Distant shouts and the sound of breaking glass could be heard, even from their position at the edge of the property. Through Father Michael's small spyglass, they had watched Sheriff Cooper hurry toward the commotion with four of Gallagher's men in tow. Ethan and Elena moved silently through the kitchen gardens, their borrowed servants' clothing allowing them to blend with the shadows. The night air carried the scent of desert sage and wood smoke, the temperature dropping rapidly as darkness deepened. Two guards at back door, Elena whispered, her keen eyes picking out details Ethan would have missed. One smoking, one half asleep. Ethan nodded, studying the layout. The servants' entrance was a simple wooden door set into the stone foundation of the mansion's rear wing. Unlike the grand front entrance with its sweeping steps and ornate lamps, this door was functional, unadorned, meant for those who worked unseen. I'll take the one on the left, Ethan murmured. Wait for my signal. He circled wide through the garden, using a row of fruit trees as cover until he was positioned behind the first guard. A burly man with a shotgun resting carelessly across his knees as he dozed on a wooden stool. The second guard stood several feet away, smoking a cigarette, his attention focused on the distant commotion in town. Ethan moved quickly, covering the final distance in 3 swift strides. His hand clamped over the dozing guard's mouth while the knife from his boot, Elena's gift, found the man's ribs. A single thrust, quick and silent. The guard stiffened, then went limp. Before the body could slump to the ground, Elena materialized from the darkness behind the second guard. Her method was even more efficient. A thin cord looped around the man's neck, cutting off both sound and breath in one swift motion. The cigarette dropped from nerveless fingers as she lowered him gently to the ground. Their eyes met briefly over the fallen guards. No words necessary. This wasn't their first killing, nor would it be their last this night. Justice and vengeance had become intertwined, inseparable in the face of Gallagher's evil. The door yielded to Ethan's touch, unlocked as Father Michael had predicted. The kitchen beyond was empty, the staff likely gathered elsewhere to gossip about the disturbance in town. A single lamp burned low on a large wooden table, providing just enough light to navigate by. Servants' stairs, Elena whispered, nodding toward a narrow doorway at the far end of the kitchen. Lead to upper floors. Abigail may be there. And Gallagher's study is through the main hall, Ethan added, recalling Father Michael's sketch. We'll split up. You find Abigail, I'll look for the evidence. Elena frowned. Dangerous to separate. Faster this way, Ethan countered. We don't have much time before someone notices those guards are missing. After a moment's hesitation, Elena nodded. Meet back here. 20 minutes. No longer. She touched his arm briefly, a gesture that had come to mean more between them than words could express. then disappeared through the servant's door. Ethan moved in the opposite direction, through the swinging door that connected the kitchen to the main part of the house. He found himself in a wide hallway lined with expensive artwork and Persian carpets. Gallagher had spared no expense in displaying his wealth and power. The study, according to Father Michael, would be the third door on the right. Ethan approached cautiously, listening for any sound from within. Hearing nothing, he tried the handle. Locked. A moment's work with Elena's knife slipped between door and frame, and the lock gave way with a soft click. Ethan eased the door open, every sense alert for danger. Gallagher's study was a testament to the man's ego. Imposing oak desk, walls lined with leather-bound law books, hunting trophies mounted above the fireplace. And there, exactly where Father Michael had described, hung a painting of the first territorial governor. Ethan crossed the room and carefully lifted the painting from its hooks, revealing a small wall safe behind it. Now came the challenge. He had no idea of the combination, and breaking into a safe required tools and time he didn't have. His eyes swept the room, searching for any clue. A man like Gallagher, arrogant in his power, might keep the combination somewhere accessible. His gaze fell on the desk blotter, where a series of numbers had been idly scribbled in the corner, perhaps during a phone conversation or while thinking. Worth a try. Ethan turned the dial carefully, inputting the sequence. Nothing. He tried again, reversing the order. Still nothing. Frustrated, he stepped back, considering his options. His eyes landed on a small calendar on the desk, open to the current month. A date was circled, July 4th, with the notation 25 years scrawled beside it. 25 years since what? Independence Day had obvious significance, but the specific anniversary, a hunch formed. Ethan tried the combination 7-4-25. The safe clicked open. Inside lay several documents, including the package they had given to Turner. Ethan grabbed it, quickly confirming its contents were intact. As he prepared to close the safe, something else caught his eye. A folder marked simply, Wade. Heart pounding, Ethan withdrew the folder and opened it. Inside were surveillance reports, spanning 3 years, detailing Noah's movement. Noah's movements, his visits to Elena's village, even transcripts of conversations Noah had with James Hollister. Gallagher had been watching his clerk closely, suspecting his loyalty long before Noah discovered the evidence of fraud. But what chilled Ethan's blood was the final report, dated the day of Noah's death. It contained a detailed plan for the accidental death of Noah Wade, including which men to use and how to make it appear like self-defense during an attempted arrest for cattle rustling. Proof, incontrovertible proof of Gallagher's direct involvement in Noah's murder. Ethan tucked the folder inside his shirt alongside the package, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and vindication. As he closed the safe and replaced the painting, a soft noise from the doorway made him freeze. He turned slowly to find Sheriff Cooper standing there, gun drawn. "I figured you'd come for the evidence," Cooper said quietly. Gallagher was counting on it. Ethan's hand hovered near his holster. "You going to shoot me, Sheriff?" "If that was my intention, you'd already be dead." Cooper kept his gun trained on Ethan but made no move to approach. Gallagher's holding misses. Hollister in his private quarters upstairs, and your Apache woman walked right into a trap. Dixon and 2 others were waiting for her. Ethan's blood ran cold. If they've hurt her, they have orders to take her alive, for now. Cooper's expression was unreadable. "Gallagher wants to make an example of you both. Public execution for the murder of Judge Turner." "Turner was already dead when we arrived," Ethan growled. "Gallagher killed him, just like he killed Noah, just like he killed James Hollister." Something flickered in Cooper's eyes. "I know." The simple admission hung in the air between them. "Then why are you still working for him?" Ethan asked. Cooper's laugh was humorless. "You think it's that simple? That a man can just walk away from someone like Gallagher?" He shook his head. "I've been in too deep for too long. Looked the other way too many times." "It's not too late to do the right thing," Ethan said, watching the sheriff carefully. "To stand for justice instead of corruption." Justice. Cooper tasted the word as if it were foreign to him. "There's precious little of that in this territory, Wade. Men like Gallagher make the rules." "Only because men like you enforce them," Ethan countered. Cooper's jaw tightened, conflict evident in his face. Finally, he lowered his gun slightly. Third floor, east wing. That's where they're holding your woman and Mrs. Hollister. Gallagher's with them. He stepped aside from the doorway. I never saw you. Never had this conversation. Ethan studied him, uncertain whether to trust this sudden change of heart. Wait, maybe I'm tired of the blood, Cooper said quietly. Maybe I want to sleep without seeing Turner's face, or Noah's, or all the others. He raised his gun again, but now it was pointed at the ceiling. Go, you've got 5 minutes before I raise the alarm. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He slipped past Cooper and hurried back toward the kitchen, intending to take the servants' stairs to the third floor. But as he passed the main staircase, he heard voices, Gallagher and someone else, descending. Can't keep this quiet, Judge, a man's voice was saying. Turner was a federal appointee. There'll be an investigation. Let them investigate, Gallagher replied, his tone dismissive. By the time any federal agents arrive, Wade and the woman will be dead, convicted of Turner's murder with Cooper as the star witness. The evidence will have mysteriously vanished in a tragic fire that claims Mrs. Hollister as well. And the child? The other man asked. An unfortunate casualty of her mother's poor choices, Gallagher said coldly. The Apache bitch will tell us where she's hidden before the end. I've arranged for Dixon to leave tonight once he gets the location. Rage surged through Ethan, hot and blinding. Without conscious thought, he stepped into view at the foot of the stairs, gun drawn. That's not going to happen, Gallagher. The judge froze on the staircase, genuine shock flickering across his face before his customary arrogance reasserted itself. The man with him, a thin, nervous-looking individual in an expensive suit, gasped and shrank back. Mr. Wade, Gallagher recovered smoothly. How enterprising of you to accept my invitation early. I wasn't expecting you until sundown tomorrow. I've always been unpredictable, Ethan replied, his voice deadly calm. Where are they? Gallagher smiled, unperturbed by the gun aimed at his chest. Your Apache whore and Mrs. Hollister? Quite comfortable, I assure you. For the moment. Take me to them now. Or what? You'll shoot me? Gallagher's smile widened. In my own home? With my men all around? He descended another step. Be reasonable, Wade. The game is over. You've lost. This isn't a game, Ethan said, his finger tightening on the trigger. And I haven't lost anything. I have the evidence, Gallagher, all of it, including your personal file on Noah, the one detailing how you ordered his murder. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Gallagher's face. Impossible. That safe wasn't as secure as you thought, Ethan finished for him. Now I won't ask again. Where are they? Gallagher glanced at his companion, who stood frozen with fear, then back at Ethan. His hand moved subtly toward his jacket. Ethan fired without hesitation. The bullet caught Gallagher in the shoulder, spinning him against the banister. The judge howled in pain, clutching his bleeding arm as he slumped to his knees on the stairs. The next one goes between your eyes, Ethan promised, advancing up the stairs. Where are they? Before Gallagher could answer, shouts erupted from the direction of the kitchen. The commotion at the saloon must have died down, allowing Gallagher's men to return. Time was running out. You're a dead man, Wade, Gallagher gasped, his face contorted with pain and hatred. You and that Apache bitch both! A gunshot echoed from upstairs, followed by a woman's scream. Ethan's heart lurched, recognizing Elena's voice. Without another word to Gallagher, he sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. The east wing was easy to find, a long corridor with doors on both sides. Another gunshot rang out from the end of the hall, followed by the crash of breaking furniture. Ethan ran toward the sound, gun ready. He burst through the door to find chaos. Elena, somehow freed from her restraints, engaged in a desperate struggle with Samuel Dixon. The gunman's face was bloody from what looked like a vicious headbutt, and he was trying to bring his pistol to bear while Elena fought to keep his arm pinned. Across the room, Abigail Hollister was tied to a chair, her face bruised, but her eyes alert and furious. A second gunman lay sprawled on the floor, a knife, Elena's knife, protruding from his chest. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired twice, the bullets taking Dixon in the back. The gunman arched with the impact, then collapsed across Elena, his blood soaking into her servant's dress. "Elena!" Ethan rushed forward, pulling Dixon's body away from her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, breathing hard. "No." Caught them surprised when they argued. She nodded toward the dead man on the floor. He thought other one too rough with Abigail. Distracted them. Ethan helped her to her feet, quickly checking for any injuries she might be ignoring. Finding none, he moved to free Abigail while Elena retrieved her knife. "Thank God," Abigail gasped as the ropes fell away. When they brought Elena in, I thought all hope was lost." "Not yet," Ethan said grimly, "but we need to move. More men will be coming." As if to confirm his words, shouts and pounding footsteps could be heard from downstairs. "The balcony," Elena suggested, pointing to a set of French doors, "leads to roof over kitchen. Can reach garden from there." They hurried to the balcony, Ethan supporting Abigail, who was unsteady from her ordeal. The roof Elena had mentioned was indeed accessible, a short drop from the balcony railing to the sloped shingles below. "I'll go first," Ethan said, holstering his gun, "then help you both down." He swung over the railing and dropped to the roof, landing in a crouch. Turning back, he reached up to help Abigail, then Elena. They had just made it to the edge of the roof when the door to the room they'd escaped from burst open behind them. "There they are!" someone shouted. "On the roof!" Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering the wood around them. They half climbed, half fell the rest of the way to the ground, landing hard in the soft dirt of the kitchen garden. "This way," Elena urged, pulling them toward the cover of the fruit trees they had used earlier. More shots followed them, but the darkness and distance made accurate aim impossible. They ran, weaving through the trees, heading for the rear of the property where the fence was lowest. Behind them, the mansion had erupted into chaos, men shouting, lanterns bobbing as searchers spread out across the grounds. "What about Gallagher?" Abigail gasped as they ran. "Did you?" "Shot him, but not fatally," Ethan replied grimly. "He'll live to face justice." They reached the fence, a 6-foot barrier that would be challenging for Abigail in her weakened state. Ethan cupped his hands to give her a boost, then helped Elena over. He was just preparing to follow when a shot rang out from nearby, and pain exploded in his side. Ethan staggered, clutching at the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers. The bullet had caught him in the same area as his previous injury, reopening the barely healed flesh. "Ethan!" Elena's voice came from the other side of the fence. "What happened?" "Go," he managed, turning to face his attacker. "Get to safety. I'll catch up." Harrison Gallagher stood 20 paces away, a smoking pistol in his good hand, his wounded shoulder clearly paining him, but his aim steady. Blood had soaked the front of his expensive suit, but his eyes burned with a fanatic's intensity. "Noble to the end," the judge sneered. "Just like your brother. He thought he could save the Apache woman too, begged for her life even as he bled out." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You were there when Noah died." "Of course I was there," Gallagher spat. "Did you think I'd trust hired guns to handle something so important?" I watched the light fade from his eyes. Watched him call your name. His smile was cruel. "He died thinking you'd abandoned him, that you didn't care enough to be there when he needed you most." Rage and grief threatened to overwhelm Ethan, but he forced them down. Giving in to emotion now would only get him killed. He needed to be calm, focused. "He died a better man than you'll ever be," Ethan said quietly, "and his death won't go unavenged." Gallagher laughed. "Vengeance? Is that what you think this is about?" He gestured expansively with his wounded arm, wincing at the movement. "This is about the future, Wade, about progress. The silver from these lands will build railroads, factories, cities. What are a few dead Apache compared to that?" "It's not yours to take," Ethan replied. "The land, the lives, none of it." "It's mine by right of strength," Gallagher countered, "by right of vision. Men like me built this country, Wade. Not savages, not bleeding hearts like your brother." His expression hardened. "And certainly not drifters who can't even protect their own kin." With the last word, Gallagher raised his gun again, aiming carefully. But before he could fire, a shadow moved behind him. Elena, who had somehow circled back around the fence without being seen. Her knife flashed once in the moonlight as she drove it into Gallagher's back. The judge arched in agony, the gun discharging harmlessly into the ground as he collapsed to his knees. Elena stood over him, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and cold rage. "That for Noah," she said quietly. "For my people. For all you kill." Gallagher tried to speak, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth, but no words came. He toppled forward onto the ground, his life bleeding out into the soil of the land he had coveted so ruthlessly. Elena hurried to Ethan's side, examining his wound. "Bad?" she asked, her hands already working to staunch the bleeding. "I've had worse," he grimaced. "Recently, in fact." She nodded toward the fence. "Can climb?" "Have to," Ethan replied, gritting his teeth against the pain. With Elena's help, he managed to scale the fence, dropping heavily on the other side where Abigail waited anxiously. "Oh, thank God," Abigail breathed when she saw them both. "I heard shots." "Gallagher won't be troubling anyone again," Ethan said grimly. He pulled the evidence from inside his shirt, handing it to Abigail. "You need to take this. Get it to the territorial capital. There's enough here to expose the entire corruption scheme, including Noah's murder." Abigail accepted the package with trembling hands. "What about you two?" Elena was already tearing strips from her dress to bind Ethan's wound. "We go for Sarah," she said simply. "Too dangerous here now." Shouts and lantern light indicated Gallagher's men were getting closer. They had minutes at most before they were discovered. "There's a stagecoach leaving for Tucson at dawn," Abigail said urgently. "I can be on it with the evidence. But you need medical attention, Ethan." "No time," he replied, wincing as Elena tightened the makeshift bandage. "We need to disappear before the whole town is after us." "Father Michael," Abigail suggested. "He can help with your wound, give you shelter until it's safe to travel." It was their best option. Together they made their way through the darkness toward the church, leaving behind the body of the man who had cast such a long shadow over all their lives. Justice had been served, not through courts and laws, but through the ancient arithmetic of blood and vengeance. As they reached the church, Ethan glanced back one last time at Gallagher's mansion on the hill. Lanterns still bobbed across the grounds as men searched, unaware that the master they served was already cooling in the dirt of his precious garden. "It's over," he murmured, as much to himself as to Elena beside him. She followed his gaze, her expression solemn. "Not yet," she replied softly. "Not until Sarah's safe. Not until home." Ethan nodded, understanding. The circle would not be complete until they had retrieved Noah's daughter, their niece and daughter, and found a place where they could live in peace. The final chapter of their journey still lay ahead. Father Michael proved as good as his word, tending to Ethan's wound with surprising skill. Seminary training included basic medicine, he explained as he cleaned and dressed the injury. God's work often requires healing hands as well as a compassionate heart. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed any vital organs. "A clean wound," the priest pronounced, "painful but not life-threatening if infection can be avoided." They remained hidden in the church basement for 3 days, while Cedar Creek churned with the aftermath of Gallagher's death. Through Father Michael's discreet inquiries, they learned that Sheriff Cooper had assumed temporary authority, claiming Gallagher had been killed by Apache raiders, who had also murdered Judge Turner. "Cooper's maintaining Gallagher's narrative," Father Michael reported grimly. "But there's dissent. Not everyone believes the official story, especially with Mrs. Hollister gone and rumors spreading about the documents she took with arm." On the morning of the 4th day, news arrived that changed everything. A telegram from the territorial capital announcing that federal agents were en route to Cedar Creek to investigate allegations of corruption and murder. Abigail had succeeded in delivering the evidence. "It's time for us to leave," Ethan said, carefully testing his bandaged side. The wound still pained him, but he could move reasonably well. "Before those federal agents arrive and we get tangled in depositions and trials." Elena nodded her agreement. "Sarah waiting too long already." Father Michael provided them with supplies, a horse, and his blessing. "There will always be a place for you here," he told them as they prepared to depart, "should you ever need sanctuary again." They left Cedar Creek as they had arrived, quietly, unremarked by most of its citizens. The town that had been the center of Gallagher's corrupt empire already seemed smaller, less significant as they rode away. Its power to haunt them diminished with each mile they put between themselves and its blood-soaked streets. Their journey to the hidden Apache village where Sarah waited took 3 days of careful travel. Ethan's wounds slowed them, requiring frequent rest, But Elena proved a patient companion, never showing frustration at their pace. Instead, she used the time to teach him more about tracking, about reading the desert's subtle signs, about her people's ways. And in the quiet evenings beside their small campfires, they spoke of Noah, sharing memories that slowly transformed grief into something gentler, more bittersweet. Through these conversations, Ethan felt he came to know his brother more deeply than he had in life, to understand the man Noah had become in those years they were separated. On the afternoon of the third day, they crested a ridge, and Elena reined in their horse, her posture suddenly alert. "We close," she said simply. "Village over, next rise." Ethan felt his heart quicken. After all this time, all the blood and sacrifice, he was about to meet Noah's daughter, his niece. Elena must have sensed his nervousness, for she reached back to touch his arm reassuringly. "She good girl," Elena said softly. "Strong like father, smart like mother." A rare smile touched her lips, maybe stubborn like uncle. The village, when they reached it, was little more than a cluster of traditional wickiups nestled in a sheltered canyon. A small stream provided water, and carefully tended gardens indicated the settlement was at least semi-permanent. Several Apache looked up as they approached, expressions wary until they recognized Elena. Then quiet greetings were exchanged in their native tongue. An older woman emerged from one of the larger dwellings. Elena's aunt, Ethan guessed from her resemblance to Elena and her age. She hurried forward, speaking rapidly in Apache. Elena replied, dismounting and embracing the woman briefly. Then the older woman turned toward a small figure who had appeared in the doorway of the wickiup, a little girl of perhaps 2.5 years, with dark hair and solemn eyes that assessed Ethan with startling intelligence. "Sarah," Elena called softly, extending her hand. The child hesitated only briefly before running to her mother, who swept her up in a fierce embrace. Ethan watched, emotion threatening to overwhelm him as he saw Noah's daughter for the first time. The resemblance was unmistakable. She had Noah's eyes, the same thoughtful expression he remembered from when they were children. Elena turned to him, still holding Sarah. "This is Ethan," she said to the little girl in English. "Your father's brother, your uncle." Sarah regarded him solemnly for a long moment, then said something in Apache that made Elena smile. "She asked if you have candy like her father always bring." Ethan laughed, surprising himself with the sound. "Not today," he replied, addressing Sarah directly. "But next time, I promise." The child seemed to accept this, offering a small, tentative smile that transformed her serious face. Ethan felt something shift inside him. A burden lifting, a wound beginning to heal. This was Noah's legacy, his gift to the future. Not the evidence that would bring down Gallagher's corrupt empire, important though that was, but this small, perfect life full of potential and promise. They stayed in the village for 2 weeks while Ethan's wound continued to heal and Sarah grew accustomed to his presence. The Apache were reserved but hospitable, accepting him primarily because of Elena's vouching for him. He made efforts to learn basic phrases in their language, to understand their customs, to show respect for their ways. In the evenings, Elena would often tell Sarah stories about her father, about Noah's kindness, his curiosity, his love for books and knowledge. Ethan added his own memories, tales of their childhood on the farm, of Noah's early fascination with the law and justice. Together, they wove a tapestry of remembrance that would ensure Sarah knew the man whose blood ran in her veins, even though she would never know him personally. On a clear autumn evening, as they sat outside Elena's aunt's wickiup watching the sunset paint the canyon walls, Ethan broached the subject that had been on his mind. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Where do we go from here?" Elena considered the question, absently stroking Sarah's hair as the child dozed against her shoulder. "Not stay here," she said finally. "Too many memories, too much blood on this land." Ethan nodded, understanding. "The cabin in the canyon," he suggested. "It's remote, defensible. We could make a life there." "For how long?" Elena asked, her dark eyes searching his. "You not stay in one place before, always moving, running from ghosts." The observation struck home. She was right. He had been running for years from the war, from Noah's death, from his own failures and regrets. "I'm tired of running," he admitted, "tired of being alone." He met her gaze directly. "I'd like to stay, with you and Sarah, if you'll have me." The question hung between them, layered with meaning beyond the simple words. They had traveled a long road together, from strangers to reluctant allies to something deeper, harder to define. Elena was silent for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Cabin need much work," she said finally. "New roof, stronger walls for winter." "I'm good with my hands," Ethan replied, hope rising, "and I learned quickly." "Sarah need both mother and father," Elena continued. "Need family, stability." "I can't replace Noah," Ethan said softly. "Wouldn't try to. But I can be there for her. For both of you." Elena studied him, as if searching for something in his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "Then we go to cabin. Make home there." The simple declaration held profound meaning. Home, a concept Ethan had abandoned years ago, convinced it was beyond his reach, beyond what he deserved. They left the Apache village 3 days later, their few possessions packed on a second horse provided by Elena's aunt. Sarah rode with Elena, already excited about the journey to what her mother had described as their new home in the mountains. The trail back to the hidden canyon was longer than Ethan remembered, but the familiar landmarks eventually appeared. The distinctive rock formation Elena had pointed out during their first journey, the ancient trees split by lightning, the narrow pass that served as the canyon's natural gateway. And then, finally, the cabin came into view, looking smaller and more weather-beaten than he recalled. The roof sagged in places, and one wall showed signs of damage from winter storms. But the stone foundation remained solid, and the location, sheltered from winds, near a reliable spring with good visibility of the approaches, was ideal. "Home," Elena said simply as they dismounted before the cabin door. Sarah immediately set about exploring, her natural curiosity overcoming any shyness. Ethan watched her darting among the trees, examining rocks and plants with the same intensity Noah had brought to his studies. The sight filled him with a bittersweet joy. That night, after Sarah was asleep on the small cot they had prepared for her, Ethan and Elena sat outside the cabin beneath a canopy of stars. The peace of the place was profound, broken only by the soft murmur of the nearby spring and the occasional call of a nightbird. "3 years," Ethan said quietly. "3 years I've been searching for justice for Noah, hunting Gallagher, living only for vengeance." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I want to live for something else." He turned to her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "For Sarah. For building something here, something good. For," he hesitated, finding the words difficult after so long alone, "for you." Elena's hand found his in the darkness. "Noah would be glad," she said softly, "to know his brother and daughter together. Safe." "And you?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "What would make you glad?" In answer, Elena leaned forward and kissed him, gently, briefly, but with unmistakable meaning. When she pulled back, her eyes held a mixture of certainty and vulnerability that took his breath away. "This," she said simply. "Family, peace, new beginning." Ethan drew her closer, mindful of his healing wound but needing the contact, the confirmation that this was real, that they had survived the blood and fire to find something worth building upon. Dawn found them still outside, wrapped in blankets against the mountain chill, watching as the first light touched the canyon walls. Sarah emerged from the cabin, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and immediately crawled into her mother's lap, regarding Ethan with that solemn, assessing gaze that so reminded him of Noah. "Uncle stay?" she asked in her limited English, surprising them both with the direct question. "Yes," Ethan answered, meeting those familiar eyes. "Uncle stay." Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied, and snuggled closer to Elena. "Good," she pronounced with childish certainty. "Fix roof." Elena's laughter, rare and precious, rang out in the morning air. "Smart girl," she said, hugging her daughter. "Already know what important." As they sat together in the growing light, Ethan felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The journey that had begun with Noah's death, with blood soaking into Arizona soil and a promise made in grief, had led here to this moment, to this family forged through loss and struggle and hope. The ghosts that had haunted him, the men he had killed in war, the brother he had failed to save, seemed to recede, not vanishing, but taking their proper place in the past. For the first time in years, Ethan weighed, looked to the future with something approaching peace. The cabin would need work, the garden would need planting, the horse would need a proper corral. Their life here would not be easy. The land was unforgiving, the memories still raw in places. But they would face it together, one day at a time, building on the foundation Noah had unwittingly laid through his courage and sacrifice. In the distance, a wild horse appeared on the ridge above the canyon, a stallion, standing proud against the morning sky. It watched them for a long moment, as if taking their measure, then turned and disappeared into the wilderness beyond. Elena smiled at the sight. "Good omen," she said softly, "free spirit watching over us." Ethan nodded, holding her words close. Freedom, protection, family, the very things he had thought forever beyond his reach. Now they lay before him, not as distant dreams, but as tangible possibilities, waiting to be grasped and held and cherished. "We'll be all right," he said, the words both promise and prayer. Elena's hand found his again, her strength flowing into him as it had since that first moment in the desert when she had refused to let him die alone. "Yes," she agreed simply, "we will." And in that moment, as the sun rose fully over their new beginning, Ethan believed her with all his heart. The end.